We actually went over like charters. We went over like, trips you can actually take there and how much they cost, and so nobody's saying you can't get down there. They'll attack you with guns. Nobody in this server is it anyway. Went off
Yeah,
like
maybe
that.
nobody in this server, but I've talked to plenty of people who I brought that exact thing up to. Like, well, why don't you just go and find out? Well, how do I know that they'll even take me there? And how do I know that it'll be even safe? That it might be just a bunch of lies, and that's probably fake footage. And they've been saying it for a long time. Maybe nobody in this server, but
you
there's
do
a
have
lot
to
of
be
flat earthers
approved
out
though.
there.
You do have to be approved though, BigTech. That is the thing. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
in
fine.
terms of cash, in terms of it's a very expensive thing to do. You can't freely and privately go to Antarctica and explore by yourself, and there's all kinds of limitations. So that's kind of that's what I think, and what most people I would say in this server would say. Yeah, but I definitely understand why there's certain flat earthers that might have took the extreme version of that and said, "Oh no, they'll fucking yeah," you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
but there's controlled territories on the sea too that are special, military zones and fishing zones that you just can't go anywhere you want on the ocean. They'll just turn you, hey, this is a restricted zone.
Patiently, number 40. Andy. Hey, thanks. Andy, I'm not being mean. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings or anything, so don't take this any wrong way.
I won't.
But do you see how it's impossible for you to really tell me an end goal for their side at first? You might be able to kind of give me an answer now, but there is really none. And I can extrapolate it by now asking, why did Will Duffy find this so important to spend $250,000 on?
Mm-hmm.
Andy, why? Why do you think that was so important for this guy to do this? What was his end goal in a sense? Like what was the point, you think, Andy?
Do you know the answer he's given on that? Why don't you just take it from him? He's a Christian. He's a young earth Christian.
He's not a Christian.
Well, he's a pastor. You can say he's not a real one or whatever, but his stated he has a church and he has like a whole young earth cosmology that's Christian. And he has said that he doesn't like the flat earthers getting involved because he thinks that it discredits a biblical story in the way that he sees it. So he's he
discredits the Bible himself by saying that there is no passages that
that's
says
fine.
that is not
that's your
immoral.
Opinion.
No, not my opinion. What he said. He says it's not immoral to lie.
Yeah, your opinion is that that's wrong.
No, scripture says that. What are you talking about?
I don't know the exact context of that, but I think he was talking about there's a nuance, right?
Yeah,
and I don't want to make excuse. Yeah, I don't want to make excuses because I understand why like this is a sin. I think he was probably, and I don't know because I haven't watched the context of the whole thing.
Yeah,
but
you just disagree with him on it.
He specifically says. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna show you what he says.
I've seen what he says.
I'm commenting
and he justified
on that.
it.
It might
in his
be.
Okay, so there is.
Oh my God!
I mean, unless you haven't read scriptures that tells you that God detests.
All right, you want to argue this real quick?
Hold on. God detests a lying tongue. It's an abomination to lie, practically. I mean, I look for the scripture. Revelations tells you that if you lie, you're pretty much going to hell.
Oh, I can say
there are
Proverbs.
Okay, cool.
So the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him. And proud
are there people in?
Oh my God! There are certain situations, though, right, where a lie could be actually a positive thing, the right thing to do.
Yeah, right? Andy, that was his point. I watched the sermon, and basically the example he gave was like, the Nazi comes up to your door and says, "Are there Jews under your house?" Like, it's okay to lie in that circumstance. He's definitely not saying it's okay to lie about nothing.
Andy, let me know when you're ready.
And he's been taken out of context. That's what it sounds like to me.
Abraham lies in the Bible and claims that Sarah was his sister.
Oh, it doesn't mean it's okay, though. That doesn't. A lot of people do a lot of things in the Bible.
But his point was that it's not clear that to deceive in every single circumstance is always a sin. That's what the point that he's making. He wasn't saying it's okay to be a liar. He's saying like that. Like if somebody broke in your house and said, "Where are your kids? I'm going to kill them." And if you say, "Oh, they're not here," are you going to hell now?
That's the
point he was making. It's very simple.
Did he reiterate or actually talk about that? Because I thought he said inherently.
He was saying that inherently that's not a sin. He's saying if you lie, that's not always a sin. He's just saying that's not the same as having a lying tongue or lying spirit and being a deceiver. He's just saying that telling the absolute truth in every single circumstance isn't like a requirement of holiness or righteousness. That's all he's saying about it.
Well, for that example, though, Abraham was frowned upon for doing that. Yeah, twice several people lied because they were worried about people knowing that who they were married to. That's true, but that was not, smiled upon, obviously.
Rahab lied to protect the Israelite spies. I mean, she wasn't like, chastised or she wasn't represented as a bad, like making a bad choice for doing that.
Oh, in warfare, right? Exactly. That's warfare, sure.
Exactly. So he's saying that there's moments and circumstances where, just being totally forthcoming with the actual truth isn't required. He's just saying that's not a sin. So that's what his sermon was about. And so
that judge in the end. I mean, I guess.
So Andy, what about the other people that weren't Christians that, there was a huge atheist movement, right? That got behind this. It looks like to me. That's what it looked like. Why is it so important to them?
But like this, if you like, could you guys say some Jews underneath? It means you don't trust God that will protect the Jews that are underneath your underneath the thing. Come on, dude.
When Witzit said that he had a NASA scientist, and many occasions, and I have the clips of it, when Witzit said over and over, I know a NASA scientist who went to Antarctica for 6 months during the sunny season, and it's always daylight down there, but there's never a time when it's 24-hour sun overhead. When he said that over and over, was he lying?
That's exactly what would happen if you were at 66 or 67 degrees, and there are bases there. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know if he lied or not. So I don't have to, did I say that? No, so I can't test for him.
Well, yeah, I think Witzit would say that he was mistaken by that, or maybe he just didn't check what latitude he was at. He would have something, but this is the type of thing that I think gets the Globe defenders pretty worked up when we face flat earthers who will say things and they'll insist and they'll talk to you like you're stupid for not believing them or understanding, and Witzit will start enunciating his words really slowly. You dummy! There is no 24-hour sun in Antarctica. And it's like, all right, and then he's wrong. He's like, well,
he never said that. Like he doesn't stand that firm on that point. He specifically said that he doesn't agree, and none of us have specifically said they're definitely not a 24-hour Antarctic sun. We're arguing about the videos that show the deception, like the stitched together shit that the guy come out and admitted that it was stitched and all that. So all we did is point that out. And
there's
evidence for us to say for sure there's 24-hour sun. I think you're mistaken a little bit, man. I think you're coming from an extreme point of view, man.
Well, when I talked to him a few months ago leading up to this, I showed him a different one. It's a 360 cam, just like the one he created for himself while he was down there. It shows a 24-hour sun overhead the whole time. I showed it to him. You can scroll around. It's 360. You can move.
Yeah, that's what I said. We just seen these things though.
Like, no, I showed it to him months ago, and he said, "No, I don't believe it. That's probably fake."
That's what we thought, because look, we've already been, instead of us being presented with the real thing, the first few we see are fake. So then, yes, some real ones come out, and can you knock us for having some skepticism? Because it's like, damn, here it is, 2024, coming up on 2025, and we, where's the evidence? So can you really blame us for being skeptical? I think our skepticism could turn around and save you in the future. People like us, maybe we're not always right, man, but most of us don't have a problem with admitting that, man.
Well, if it's the video, and also posted it in the live stream, 19 minutes after the hour to hear from him.
Skepticism is often connected, and it includes a lot of hubris, a lot of like insistent, which comes across as arrogant and even like hostile. These assertions that later we flat earthers, it gets walked back. Well, I didn't say exactly that and stuff. And it's like, but come on, it's like you're pressing the issue like it's for sure. We still have this whole thing where it's like it measures flat. It's still for sure flat, and it's like everybody's pressing it. It's not we're just asking questions and we're skeptical. It's like no, we're exposing a scam and we're right and you guys are wrong and we were right where you are. You're gonna come over to our side and welcome to flat earth. You just got flat smacked and all this stuff. And it's like, well, then you get hostility come from us and then we get called assholes. It's like you're not just asking questions. It's not just being skeptical. It's not just curious seeking for the truth. Is how it comes across. It comes across as that you guys have made up your mind and you're trying to convince everybody else to adopt your opinion. And then when you're encountering evidence to the contrary, whether or not it's absolutely definitive, it's like hard evidence to the contrary to deny. Like the fact that the 24-hour sun totally lines up with what we think happens in the globe doesn't work with anything I've seen presented from your side. It's just like, well, we'll figure it out. But in the meantime, we're going to keep insisting that the Earth's flat.
Can I ask you a question, BigTech? Do you to me this is not, it's undebatable. The Bible is a flat Earth book. Would you agree with that or no?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think the references to the Earth being flat are sort of vague in a way. I mean, like maybe. I think if that's the case, then it has like a weird cosmology. But I think it's not hard to make that case. I would give you that.
Perhaps it might be easy just to say, it doesn't reference a globe anyway, right?
Right, but it also doesn't reference flat exactly. It doesn't reference who discovered fire or the wheel either. It doesn't reference a lot of things.
Who gives a fuck about what the Bible thinks the Earth is? Why would you bring that up?
Well, because BigTech actually he talks a lot about because he's sort of connected a little bit with Adam Green. Adam Green talks about the whole Christianity as a sort of a Jewish psyop sort of thing.
Well, a lot of flat earthers do care about the Bible.
I wasn't actually going to go there. I was actually thinking more of something else. But as soon as you asked Bundy, that's why I asked him. And because there seems to be a biblical earther, if you will. There's a huge biblical movement attached to flat Earth.
This guy you're talking to is a biblical cosmologist?
No.
Then why would you ask him what he views this sentence in the Bible about, or what the Bible views? How did that have any reference to like how he views reality? Does he give it? The other guy that Andy was talking to, do you give a shit about the Bible?
It's a good litmus test. No, you get somebody's answer because some people go like, "Oh, it's like after you."
Can flat Earth just kind of? Can the geometry of the Earth just like separate itself from this book? I don't know why. I don't know why anyone would bring up the Bible in a flat Earth conversation. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, if Witzit was in here, he would say like, I mean, he's absolutely all about it, and his whole
why the fuck you bring it up?
The reason he goes to the geocentrism thing too, even if there's no dome and it's not flat, it's still not rotating and the stars go around us, and that proves that there's a creator and intelligent design, and they're trying to hide God from us, and the atheistic part.
Yeah, who gives a shit though? Who gives a shit about the Bible? We're talking about the Earth.
Funny. Same thing about the Bible. Same thing about Witzit. Witzit's not in here, man. Something about Witzit touchy, bro. Because holy shit, you bring up Witzit almost in every sentence you talk.
Excuse me? You think I bring up Witzit?
Not you. About BigTech.
Well, his question was who gives a fuck? And I told him who. I answered the question. It's a problem.
Well, that's not like a relevant party in this conversation. So let's not bring up Witzit, and let's also not bring up the Bible, Andy. Let's talk about the Earth.
Well, I was pointing out that a huge, I would say, the majority, in fact, of flat earthers are, they have a biblical sort of cosmology, biblical ideas of what the Earth is.
How about we talk strategy? Because BigTech brought up a point that I would want to kind of go into a little bit. In that, BigTech, would you say that you want to try to like convince people or get people away from these ideas? Like, is that what you would say part of your motivation is for interacting with these groups?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think it's bad.
Okay. And so I'm not super familiar with like every single point that you have or believe in. So correct me if I'm wrong on anything. In this sense of you would have to understand that you're dealing with people who like this isn't people's first rodeo in terms of like conspiracy. So let's just say there's a hypothetical person who's, maybe they're doing the best debunks of the flat Earth arguments, but they also think that, fluoride is okay, vaccines are okay, fortified iron in foods are okay, and that like public schooling is great. And essentially they believe in like no conspiracies, and they're leaving absolutely zero wiggle room. Just from a strategy perspective, if somebody like that comes in, if anything, it'll more like further embolden the belief. Whereas I could probably do a way better job at getting somebody away from the flat Earth position as like a thought exercise, in the sense of, there's a difference between saying that, hey, the Earth isn't flat, and saying that everything that NASA has done is legit. Like, these are completely separate positions. Whereas there are a ton of people who think that, NASA has done a lot of fakery, and the Earth is also a globe, and there is a possibility of going into space, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I would just say of the strategy of somebody who essentially denies all conspiracy. It's essentially going to fall on deaf ears, because then it comes to a question of discernment of like, oh, if you think that, fluoride in the water is good, if you think that like all vaccines are good, public schooling is good, everything that CNN says basically is good, then it lowers the legitimacy of your credibility on the things that you say about the topic that you actually want to talk about.
Are you saying that any thoughtful person can't take another individual seriously if they believe in basic?
I mean, I would say an example is, I think there was some kind of podcast that McToon and FTFE went on, right? And they went on with somebody who believes in the globe, but has like a couple conspiracies, like they're not trustworthy of NASA, like they're a normal person essentially. And when they defended the moon landing super hard, as oh, everything is like, all of that kind of stuff, then if anything, that in that moment would make that person actually consider flat Earth when they would never have considered it before, because of this like association game that people play in their minds. Which, if you're talking about strategy of trying to convince people the opposite of things, then if anything, you are having a negative effect if you are one of those people that doesn't try to find any middle ground, or is unwilling to concede any middle ground on really any other topic. All that person would be doing, who is unwilling to concede any middle ground, is bring more people over to the position they're trying to get people away from.
I'm really trying to follow you. If I could restate it, are you saying that by being open to flat Earth, you're actually making it's a better strategy to inviting people to be willing to engage in conspiracy considerations, and that by denying flat Earth and calling it stupid, you're actually driving people away from conspiracies, and then they end up vaccinating their kids, something like that?
No, it's that if you are trying to convince people away from flat Earth, the way that I would do it is be like, okay, yeah, NASA has lied about a bunch of things. Okay, yeah, like this thing, that thing, like they lied about 9/11. There's, all of these other things to get that sort of like camaraderie of like a shared ground. And then you're like, okay, here's, all of the things that are not true about flat Earth. Here's the lack of discernment, lack of research. Here's the misinterpretation of this or that or the other. That person would convince infinity more people to get away from flat Earth. Whereas if you're somebody,
that's me.
Okay.
I'm all about the 9/11 conspiracy, and I actually do the same thing with 9/11. Like, okay, if some people are skeptical about the moon landing, I get it, because it's an unbelievable thing. On its face, it's unbelievable. It's just incredible, and that's what incredible means. It's like hard to believe. So the idea that they went to the moon and landed on it and then took off from it and then made it home, and they hit a golf ball and they drove a dune buggy, like that's already like really difficult to believe. And then they did it in the 60s with the analog technology. Like, are you kidding me? That's crazy. So if that's true, it's mind-blowingly incredible. If it's false, then it was like a hoax, sound studio, whatever, Kubrick. Okay, maybe. I personally think that they actually went. I've convinced myself that they did that incredible thing, but I could be wrong about that. That's how I feel. But with 9/11, 9/11 was an inside job for sure. It was set up basically by the neocons and the Mossad agents and whatever, and it was like a false flag to get us into an endless war in the Middle East, and they blamed it on just people who hate us for our freedom and these towel heads in caves or whatever. And so that's really important for people to know. But even within the 9/11 conspiracy theory, there's people who are saying there was no planes. And they make up when you look at these people's claims, they're like really goofy and it gets weird. And I try to purge that out too, because what I find is that people who I actually really, I covet the attention of these people who are successful, powerful, strong thinkers, strong minds. They're educated, they're solid, but they're just sort of like trapped in the paradigm of what we would call like blue pilled or NPC thinking. They're still sort of trusting the media. One of the things I love the most about Trump, love him or hate him, and I certainly don't love everything. I love it. There's a lot of things about him that, I mean, he's just like, there's things that he's horrible. But what's great about him is that he coined the term fake news, and the fact that he said it so many times, he really decreased people's trust in the media. And I think that was like one of the most important things that he did, was literally just those two words to me, because it got people questioning, like, what about these news agencies? Are they just like shills and they're lying to us and stuff? So I thought that was really good. So getting people to distrust the media and to question narratives, I think it's all good. But when it goes too far, that's what I find is actually corrosive. So we need to find, in my opinion, what's real from what's false. So if we call ourselves truthers and then say things that aren't true, it kind of ruins the party. And so I want people to know that 9/11 was an inside job, and I want them to know who the insiders were and what they did and why. But I also don't want people running around saying insane BS that makes normal people hear it and they go, "Oh, this is just kooky tinfoil hat liars and scammers and grifters," and, "Oh, I don't want anything to do with any of that." And the same thing is, that's how I see flat Earth. It's like, if we're sitting over here talking about, you know, dual citizenship foreigners who've basically taken control of our country through lobbying interests, and they've got this agenda of world domination through subverting our government. And this is like really important if we want to know who the players are and who's in our politicians' pockets. And this is a really important, that is a straight up conspiracy. These people are conspiring. And if we want to expose that, that's a powerful and important and sort of dangerous conversation to have. And then if that room is full of people who are saying, yeah, and also there's a dome and they've been lying to us about the earth, and there's like Nephilim demons, and Dustin Nemos is telling us that they used to be giants and they eat babies and they had 6 rows of teeth and 6 fingers and like whatever this, it's like it gets all insane. And then normal people who I want to be able to hear about the real conspiracy, they hear that and they go, ugh, I don't want anything to do with those kooks. And then we lose them. So that's what concerns me. Like, I want to purge the truth community of lies. And that's what I think a real truther should be doing.
That's exactly that's exactly my point earlier. That's exactly what I would say, but that was much more eloquent. Well said, Big Tech. Because regardless of what the Earth is, the vast majority think it's a globe, right? Either way, even if it wasn't a globe, people think it is, like, overwhelmingly. And so, you know, if they chuck that in too, it's like, you know what I mean? It just fucks everything. It chucks a complete spanner in the works.
Okay.
Yeah, but the only reason it has that stigmatism is because the honesty ain't getting out. This is the greatest debate there is, period. It's the deepest, enriched. I mean, it's the biggest, greatest debate there is, period. It's the biggest topic. It dives off in so many directions. And yeah, if you want to bring up the absolute bullshit about it, yeah, you could paint it in that light. But the fact of the matter is what they have to do is suppress the truth that men ain't as knowledgeable as we think we are about the universe and all this stuff. And that's the honest direction that we're trying to go, is to bring in skepticism. And then some of these 9/11, 9/11 and all this stuff is easy to comprehend once you realize that men don't know everything. I mean, they're just, they're pretty much at that level deceivers, man. At the level you're talking about, there's a lot of conspiring going on. But it's a great debate, dude. And whether we're right or wrong, suppressing the information is wrong, dude. And we're fighting for just that freedom alone, to be able to make up our own mind and speak our own truth. It's still a good debate.
But yeah, so Big Tech, the thing that you're talking about has already happened. Like, that already is the state of the things right now. there is a very clear separation between the, like, every conspiracy that you've said is essentially a normie conspiracy, of like normie conspiracy land and like cosmology arguments are entirely separate. Like they don't really want anything to do with each other, in the sense of normie conspiracy, like you'll never hear really anything about flat earth in those spheres. Like there isn't really much cross-pollination in that sense.
That has
so
been my
like
experience.
I look at normie conspiracy groups and normie conspiracy spheres, and there's essentially nobody bringing up these like flat earth points. Like the most common viewpoint of flat earth within these groups is that flat earth was a CIA psyop used to discredit the real conspiracies, which is essentially the point that you brought up. Like that is the normie conspiracy viewpoint, and that is the way that the overwhelming majority of, like, you know, Alex Jones leaning conspiracy viewpoints go into, is exactly that. So like that divide that you sort of want has already happened, because flat earth has essentially like been sectioned off from the viewpoints that you actually want to get out.
Do normie, would you consider Jewish power a normie conspiracy
Yes.
topic?
Yes,
Do you
absolutely.
think it was before October 7th? Because I don't think it was. I think it only recently has come into the mainstream.
Varying different levels, but as of now, it 100% is. But I would say for the past like 10 years, at least, that it's been something that, you know, you're allowed to talk about without getting offed for the longest time.
Exactly. Anything you're not allowed to talk about, people who hear about it are automatically going to take the opposite stance. Anybody with any kind of discernment, if it can't be talked about, they're going to consider it, man. You know, why is it squat? You know, that would be what I'd say. Not everybody, but a lot of people, let's just say that, are going to automatically be like, what? Why is it not legal to talk about that? Or why is it illegal in this country? Why is this platform not allowing the discussion? Like with COVID, with the whole small hat deal, it's like for us to not be able to talk about it, man. That's where it all starts, man. It all starts with certain things that everybody can agree with, or most of the people, and it just snowballs, man. Where next thing you know, you can't talk about this, and you can't talk about that. We got to draw a line early, man.
In my experience is
nothing more important than freedom of speech, man.
When I find a community that's talking about Jewish power, and he's sort of a revision of history, the next person who speaks up mentions flat earth. Like that's my experience. Like it's every time. I
see that the biggest defenders of the moon landing, as an example, are like literal Nazi white supremacist, like Bronze Age pervert types, Hellenic type people. They're the biggest defenders of the moon landing, because their whole idea is that the only reason that we went is because of based Aryan Nazis, and the only reason we can't go now is because all of the based Aryan Nazis are dead. So if anything, I see the opposite, to where the people that counter signal against this the most are those people that are talking about the tiny hat tribe.
I mean, it's funny you mentioned Bronze Age pervert. I mean, there's some based takes there, but he's also basically like a Jewish agent. Like, you know that? Like it's like he's like a subversive. So to reference him as sort of like an Aryan power type of guy, like that's his brand. He like literally is a Jew.
Yeah, I'm just saying that general sphere of people that are like, oh, you're afraid to name them. Oh, like this is the super biggest, most important thing, and if you don't name them, then you're one of them. You know, like that kind of sphere.
I personally don't like your. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, that kind of sphere are the ones who counter signal against this stuff the most.
Yeah, well, that's not the sphere I'm talking about, I guess.
Race of people, man. I don't even like hearing that when somebody's talking about, somebody says Jews or something like that. And man, it's like, dude, you're referring to a whole people, man, and claim nefariousness like that, dude. I just think people are people. I mean, I think there's going to be evil people. There might be some evil, you know, going around like that, but I wouldn't exclude your own people and having some of that evil too. You know what I'm saying? But I don't know a lot about it, and I'll be honest.
Yeah, it's okay if you don't know a lot about it, but I'm not saying Jews are evil. That's not the point. The point is that Judaism itself is an ethno-religious supremacy cult that has like invaded our government and the final outcome of it is Zionism and this whole struggle in the Middle East, and all of our politicians are bought and sold by this group of people. So when we say Jew, we're talking about a network. We're talking about conspiracy. Judaism itself is a conspiracy. Like, it's a priest class with an agenda that spans over centuries. They see themselves as separate from us and better than us, the holy chosen ones. And so when I say Jew, I'm not talking about his bloodline. I'm talking about who he's affiliated with and what he's working for. So he's part of an organization.
And now now everyone knows why I brought up the Bible to BigTech. Thank you, because somebody was giving me shit about that earlier.
Yeah, I mean, Bronze Age Pervert, like his first outing as the Bronze Age Pervert character was on David Letterman, like 2 years before he actually became Bronze Age Pervert publicly. Which, I mean, you can say whatever you want, but like that's really kind of hard to ignore.
I didn't know that.
In that sense of my kind of joke with this is that anti-Semitism is a Semitic conspiracy. So I'm so anti-Semitic that I'm no longer anti-Semitic, because if I was anti-Semitic, then I would be falling for a Jewish psyop.
Based.
That's pretty good, actually.
Incredible. Well,
yeah, so in the sense of like, it's the whole like Hegelian dialectic thing, to where like they push one side so much, and it's like, oh, the Nazis, like the mustache man is the most evil person possible. You have to understand that when you create that sort of binary of you're essentially like some like lib shit quad vaxxed person who believes in everything about modern liberalism since 1945, or you're a Nazi. And that's kind of the dichotomy that people are given. And so when you make this super big bad enemy, it's like creating, pro wrestling heel. You know that there's going to be a certain amount of people that actually cheer for that person.
Well, no, there's a through line to this, actually, because it goes right back to Theodor Herzl, doesn't it? The founder of Zionism, who died, I think, at about 42, 44, very young age. Little lesson, kids, not to have hate in your heart. But he said something along the lines of, we're going to make the anti-Semite our best friends or our greatest ally or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the idea. So it's not about hating a person or something. It's like, for me, the way I see it, like I said before, it's about, I see them as it's just like a group that has a strategy, and that's what we're talking about. And their strategy is basically deception and subversion and seduction, really. And
yeah, so my point is that the spheres that you come from, the people that talk about all of the things that you want to talk about, there already is that super large separation, where flat Earth or alternative cosmologies is completely cut off. And if anything, they're like a lot of the biggest defenders of space.
That's not ubiquitous, though. I don't agree with you. That's not my experience. Like, if that was the case, I wouldn't be here. But like, what drew me here is that in these spheres, I keep running into flat earthers. So you're telling me that I'm not. So what are you saying?
I mean, the question is like, where would you be looking for these spheres? Because like 90+% of these spheres don't talk about this kind of stuff. There might be a little bit of kind of selection bias. So like, I'm really not sure like where you're trying to go and where you're looking for these people. But I see a very large separation in terms of these groups, to where, like I've been to conferences of professional suit and tie conferences where there are sort of like dissident right people or whatever. And like that topic isn't particularly taken seriously in that. And if anything, you would lose credibility on anything else by talking about that, which just shows the kind of separation between a lot of the spheres that you're talking about and this level of conspiracy of talking about cosmology.
Well, you're talking about suit and tie conferences. You're talking about Bronze Age Pervert. You're talking about networks of people who've been around and they know what's up and they've been doing their thing for a long time and they have their opinion. But I'm also seeing that, as I mentioned before, since post October 7th, right, when Israel went full ham on Gaza, and everybody's going like, what the fuck? They're just slaughtering these people. This is crazy. And everybody's appalled. Now there's this conversation that's exploding for a lot of people who aren't tied to, they've never heard of Bronze Age pervert, and they've never been to suit and tie conferences, and they're not like white nationalists or something like that. Candace Owens is an example, but she's not the only one. But there's a lot of these large influencers with big audiences, and you get these John Zerkas, and you get John Zerka and Sneeko, for example. They're not even white; they're pro MAGA. Sneeko's a Muslim now. Zerka's like a weird, he calls himself the cocaine crusader Catholic or something like that. These bizarre people, but these are reaching tens or hundreds of thousands of kids, and they're all they're telling them all that there's this Jewish conspiracy and also the Earth's flat. They're just lumping it together. And then when you get to Candace Owens, as soon as she starts talking about the Khazarians or the Frankists, she'll barely say Jew, but in the next week she's like, and maybe the Earth's flat, I don't know. And then it's like her whole army of soccer moms that watch her show, they're all hearing flat Earth stuff, and she doesn't know what's up because somebody comes and starts whispering in her ear, oh, you're into conspiracies? Well, have you heard that NASA is a giant scam and their rockets all go in the ocean and we never went to the moon and the Earth's flat and there's a dome and they're trying to hide God from us? And like the flat earthers show up into all these new conversations. And I'm saying, like, I'd like to see there become a barrier to that. I'd like to see a membrane around all these newcomers to these conspiracy conversations. I don't think they should all have to go through the flat earth, the fall into flat earth. I don't like seeing that happen. So that's why
Most people don't give a shit about the Earth, dude. About the shape. Most people don't.
Okay, yeah. In that sense, I will have no disagreements with you there, and that flat Earth is generally being a topic that is having, essentially military people talking about it, of like influencers, that it's no longer a topic that is going to get you, completely killed off of the internet. And you can have people that are pushed by the biggest, dissident, like Hegelian dialectic, the counter party. People that are pushed by the counterparty are essentially allowed to talk about it at this point, which I do agree with.
If you go to the biggest debate channel on YouTube, I think it's Modern Day Debates. Modern Day Debates, most of their debates.
I've been on there 5 times. I've been on there 5 times myself.
And you're debating flat Earth, right?
I've always been real, dude. Like I try. I think if we're going to put out information, I think there's a lot of new flat earthers are fitting they're repeating some of the fake flat Earth info. That personally Geo does a good job of allowing enough back and forth where, I mean, there's Globers who even do this, like push the BS globe argument. There are some good ones and there are some BS ones, but I think there's a lot of flat earthers like TikTok and X repeating the old stuff, and maybe saying it wrong, like you heard before about Antarctica being a secret place or something like that. Like there is an argument to be said, but I think it's important that we get out the proper information, the proper arguments, because that's not one of them. That you could point out Jarl Anhoy and the fact that the military was watching him, but he threw anchor at Harbor Bay or whatever, or Harbor, I forgot, Shelter Bay, and as soon as he threw anchor, they approached him and all that. But that's a whole other story. But the fact of the matter is that, like Andy said, there is truth to it too. So we hear the Globers say in one extreme, and then we sometimes, we hear the flat earthers go into the other extreme. But the truth is in the middle, and I think we need to, me as a content creator, I just, not a big one, but still, whoever I can reach, I want to, even on Modern Day Debate, like I try and say the true arguments, man, not make shit up.
So I see Flat Earth Dave going on with Roseanne. I see him going on with the Tinfoil Hat podcast. Like these big podcasts are talking about flat Earth. Eddie Bravo's always on with Joe Rogan, and he's saying that the Earth's flat. And these big influencers are out here saying, "Well, what's up with all this stuff?" And usually, what they're doing is they're repeating stuff that they heard from these others. And I shouldn't bring up Witsit again, but they're hearing things from these flat Earth debaters and YouTubers, and they're running it out into these bigger venues and bigger audiences, and basically just sowing this sort of like weird impression among people that. So on one episode they're talking about a real conspiracy, and the next episode they're talking about flat Earth, and it gets like sort of like lumped together for the normies who are just tuning in for entertainment, and they're going, conspiracy theory, what do you mean? What are you, some sort of flat earther? Oh, you believe in Epstein? Oh, I bet you believe in flat Earth too. And it muddies the water.
I get.
Yeah.
I get that
So
argument,
and forget TikTok too. I forgot about
this,
TikTok.
One last thing, real quick. One last thing, real quick, is like Austin. You got to give him credit for this. Like he's one of the only flat earthers, not the only, but one of the only ones who, when he's sitting there saying stuff, and even in debates, he's steel man. He'll say the globe argument. Like he's not just going to leave people hanging and take them off to left field, man. He'll literally say, you know, and the Globers will say this. He does that all the time, man. He's one of the few, and I think that's an honest approach. If you steel man instead of making straw mans, and you know, steel man your opposition's argument. I think that's a very honest approach, man. I don't see how people don't see that.
Well, I don't see that. I mean, what he does is actually it's actually a form of subversion. No, let me go ahead and steel man your thing, and he'll say it in a way that sounds good, but he's actually leaving some parts out or over exaggerating some parts, and he's sort of like he's making it sound a little ridiculous. It's like the actual thing that you guys are actually saying.
Give me an example. I think you're wrong. I would like an example. One example of that, where he does it like that.
Shoot, I don't know. You put me on the spot there a little bit. I don't think I want to do that because then I'm going to have to stand on how I said it, and if I mess it up, then it's like that's just my impression of him. I don't think he comes out and gives like a good. I haven't heard him give.
Just keep that in mind, though. I'll take you off the spot, but keep that in mind. What I just said when you hear him from now on, and I think maybe, you know, and so will I. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think he does it like that. Maybe to a certain extent, but not as much as maybe you have set in your mind. I think he gives the honest steel man argument, what the Glober's saying, and then he says why it's wrong. You know, that's what I think he does all the time.
So is the broader point, Big Tech, that you think like flat Earth is like stopping people from knowing about like real conspiracy theories?
Yeah, it puts a turd in the punch bowl. It makes it everybody go, I don't think I want to spend time in listening to this stuff. An example of that is like he did a debate with Destiny. That's a big name in politics and in understanding world events and stuff. For whatever reason, Destiny's like a main guy. And at the end of it, Destiny's like, wait a minute, you're a flat earther? So he's like defending Trump over Kamala, while Witsit doesn't even believe in Trump. He thinks he's the Antichrist or something like that, which is sort of ironic, but he was still presenting the case that Trump's a better choice than Kamala based on just civic issues alone. And at the end of it, Witsit's like, well, I mean, we could debate that if you want. Yeah, I am a flat earther and I think dinosaurs are fake. And then I watched the whole audience with Witsit, with Destiny, who could have heard something true from Witsit, and so Witsit's basically saying things that I would say, and then the whole audience that's watching Destiny goes like, oh, of course the Trump guy's a flat earther, and it just makes all of us look, who's represented on the other side of the argument against Kamala, it's like, oh, our guy is also a flat earther, like, and they go, of course, duh, and it's just, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't want people in my sphere also shilling this other thing. It's like, it is a little bit of a purity issue.
Yeah, I would say for this purity thing, it does go in sort of like layers, and this is why like everything is always just best done on a sort of an individual level, in that everybody will make arguments about this from various different points. As in, you know, Noemi MAGA Trumpers will say like, oh, like we're making so much good work, but these darn anti-Semites, and then the anti-Semites are like, oh, we're doing so much good work, but these darn flat earthers. And the flat earthers are like, oh, we're doing so much good work, but that darn Yasuke talking about bones. And so there's continuous layers of this sort of like gatekeeping, which is fundamentally why it's just like everybody is going to make their sort of levels of like, here is where people can go to. But that's why you sort of self-select of like, here is your group, here's the people that you vouch for, here's the levels that you're willing to go on to, here's the sort of the charter of, as this group we believe in this, and then these are topics that are sort of not on the table. These are topics that will get you ostracized from the community, and like we don't welcome you here when you have these ideas. Every community has those, so essentially that's why it's sort of important for you and your community, you and your level of influence to say, here's where we draw these lines. It would be uncouth to go into another group and say, hey, here is the things that you guys shouldn't do. Because there's certain like conspiracies or certain ideas that I think are like wrong, right? And what I would do is in my community, I'm going to say, hey, these things, like, nah, we don't do that. Like, I don't think that like low level racism is, like good, as in it's something that they want you to do. And it's just very sort of low vibrational energy to go into that kind of stuff. So I will put up walls and say in my group, like, I don't vibe with that. But I'm not going to go into groups of other people who are all about that low level racism and be like, hey, you're not supposed to do that. Because all you can do is just control the groups that you have. And that is where sort of the boundaries should lie. Because if anything,
this is why you're so confusing, dude. Because you say something so thoughtful like that, and then you go and say, "Which is a girl?" you're questioning whether he's a man.
That proves his point exactly. Is like the lines that people draw are completely arbitrary and personal. So like the bones thing is too far for most people, but it's not too far for Yasuke.
I mean, some things are just so outrageous, though, aren't they? Don't you think that they're not even worth?
And that's the line and the bar that you have drawn, and that's the line that's perfectly fine. Like, I'm not going to try to convince you about bones, and that's not really something that I'm super interested in doing, and it wouldn't be good for either of us. So, like, yeah, that's essentially just what it is. It's like here is the line in the sand that you draw in your own community. Whereas if anything, BigTech, what you're doing right now of constantly interacting with these groups, you are creating that cross-pollination, which makes it more likely that these things actually happen. Because you're never going to get rid of these people. You're never going to be getting rid of these groups existing. And all you're doing is by cross-pollinating sort of your groups and your ways of thinking with this, there's going to be some people going back and forth between that. And that is exactly what you're trying to avoid. So, yeah, that would essentially be it.
That's one way of looking at it. I don't look at it that way, because I don't draw a line. It's like I'm not happy with the idea that the world, it needs to just be set up where it's just a bunch of different little cliques and we all see things differently and we're all just okay. Like we're just going to segment ourselves off and partition ourselves. And in this group, we believe this, and in that group, we believe that. And nobody can even do. It's like, at what point are there some things about the world? Like, at some point, the ultimate one, the world itself. Can we find agreement with each other about the world that we live on? That's why the flat Earth one is so interesting, because there are a lot of subsets of groups. But the overarching one is, well, what about, we all live on the planet? We can at least agree about that, right? And then there's one who goes, no, we don't live on a ball. We live in a whole different world than you all. And it just increasingly segments people apart rather than there being a larger thing that we can agree on. Is there what's the fundamental thing we can all agree on? And some people want to say, we all agree that Jesus is real and he's God, right? And then people go, no.
Raw milk's better than pasteurized.
Exactly. So there's all these little, is it religion? Is it diet? Is it lifestyle? Is it capitalism or socialism or something like that? But at least we could agree that the ground we walk on, like we know what the planet is, at least, right? No, we don't even know that either. And so I'm starting at literally ground zero and going, like, well, can we, if we can get that one worked out, maybe we can build from there into a reality that we all share together across these different groups of different opinions. But at least we can find at least some common ground somewhere. But I see the flat Earth is like the erosion, the deepest common ground that we could all share, which is literally the ground itself.
The problem is figuring out what the Earth is really hard to do. And you guys act like you got it all figured out, but that doesn't matter. The point is there's way more immediate problems to everybody's life that we do all agree on. Maybe you don't. Like raw milk is better than pasteurized, as an example.
All right. Well, I mean,
so we can't even get raw milk, and you're talking about flat Earth is a big problem when they're poisoning millions of children.
Well, wait.
So you're actually. All right, go ahead.
No, you can finish your point.
Well, my opinion is that if we could at least get on board with something we all agree on, maybe we could work our way up to having better milk.
Well, what I want to say, I mean,
milk is number one. Go ahead.
Well, no, I hear you. Maybe you were linking it into this, but it is also slightly a different topic. But I assume you were just kind of linking it in, unless you know, shift to that whole topic. But no, I just wanted to say real quick, BigTech, like in relation to this, I hear what you're saying, but like, okay, so from the perspective that the truth is that the Earth isn't a globe, don't you think it would be a huge folly, as it were, if everyone was like, let's get on the page of this globe, and then everyone moves forward, you know, the youth of our nation, basically everybody, you know, whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and you're at the cutting edge of this field or that field or whatever it may be, sociology, psychology, politics, the whole nine, you know, the whole picture. And if all of those people were like on board with a complete deception about what the Earth is, don't you think that would be a huge issue? It's like everyone's on a ship that's just not the truth. Like, so isn't that the foundation that is like there's a lot of there's a key importance in terms of what that truth is, so that we're not all just thinking that we're all good with whatever cutting edge stuff we're doing, but then we're completely deceived on like a foundational level.
Yeah, if it was a deception, that would be a problem.
Yeah,
sure.
But so this is the thing, is that like that idea of like you're never going to have common ground on anything with everybody. And it's naive utopian idealism to sort of think otherwise. Like there's always going to be, on no matter what the topic is, like the shape of the Earth, you might think that it is like that. Okay, this should be the simplest thing, but there are even simpler things that you're going to have disagreements on.
Yep.
And so in that sense, you know, like you have people believing that food kills you. You know, you have people believing that water kills you, which is true. Water is bad. Don't drink water.
Yeah. Water is bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a great topic. Everybody thinks, oh, hey, you should drink 8 glasses of water a day, or water is good for you. Whereas I personally don't think that water is good to drink for you at all. So that would be something to where most people would think, hey, this is common ground that we should all share. Even if you don't drink water, you should still think water is good. I'm just using this as an example.
Yeah. And I would say to BigTech, the problem is like, dude, we can't even get milk, and you're trying to talk about like what the entire Earth is, and let's get everybody on board with the Earth. We can't even get milk. So there's bigger problems here.
All right, am I in the Milk Awakening server or the
Yes, you
Earth
are.
Awakening server?
When I show up, yes.
Yeah, but it's just in that sense of like there are the things that we can all actually interact with and personally, you know, verify ourselves, and are things that are fundamental to our own basis of humans that we all interact with, and we still have disagreements on that. So why would there not be disagreements on, you know, whether or not to trust this footage that was given to us by the American Empire 50 years ago?
I think it's worth pointing out too that I think it's down to the individual in terms of how they just react to certain bits of information as well. Like for me, when I saw some certain long distance observations, I felt like I'd been kicked in the balls, and I literally had to lay down. It was fucking painful. I wasn't in a good place anyway, so I was laying down a lot at that point. But point is, there is a positive, and while I agree with you, BigTech, on most things you just said there, and the turn the punch bowl is, oh man, don't get me started on that. But it's like most folks, they wander around on autopilot, and from my perspective at least, like FE just shook me to my core so much that it you know, it grabs your fucking reasoning faculties and like gives them a fucking shake, you know what I mean? And it makes you go, right, I need to look into this. I need to fucking, you know, really start researching this, for me anyway. And like I said, it just shook me to my core so much. I was like, because I've said this before, I think the first and most important thing is to realize there is a creator of some kind. I'm not going to take it down that road because that's your own personal journey. The second thing is, what are we standing on? You know, where is this thing? Where is this place? Right? Where is this realm? And so for me, it just shook my reasoning faculties so much that I was like, there was an awakening there. So there is a sort of good side to it as well, in my opinion, in my experience.
I know what you're talking about exactly, and this is what I find is so insidious about it, is because things like these long distance photographs will be presented, and then but there's always like a subversive angle to it. It's like what I witness in churches. Like they'll get the music going just right. It's very hypnotic and it's in the key of G and it's got the certain syncopation and the choir's going. And then the pastor, he's talking and he's waving around the big book, the ancient book that's the word of God. And the word of God says that if you repent, you will be forgiven, and all that you've done and all that you will ever do will be because Jesus is Christ. He sacrificed himself for
Dude,
you.
how is this all connected to whoa, we see too far?
And my point
How
is
is that connected to that?
It creates a shock. It creates a shock to the person, and the person has like this place where they feel shaken. And then when they give into this frame of this shocking thing that they've been presented with, it's essentially they've entered into a type of their cognitive function has been shaken, and it's been penetrated with an idea that's foreign and false. And now they're in a new world paradigm that they are trapped in. And I see people falling into this trap a bunch with an Eric Dubé video where he's speaking like this and he's showing you 100 proofs that the earth's actually flat, and they're all bullshit, but he tells you like you're finding out the truth, and he's hypnotizing people just like a priest.
Yeah, we think he's like a shill, but he does say true things, but that's how he's effective. You have to, if you're going to be a shill, you got to tell the truth a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, he talks about a lot of Jew like Holocaust thingies as well, you know, like on everything aside from the shape of the earth. Like you probably will agree with most of the things that he says.
BigTech, let me tell you what's going on here. So,
is it about milk?
It is a little bit, yeah.
All right.
Basically, the foods will create the society. So when you have really toxic people, you're going to end up with a sick society of people whose brains don't function well. They don't have a lot of energy. They have no intuition. They're disconnected from the human intuition through chemical poisoning. So with things like raw milk, this is the reason why it's really hard to get, is because they don't want people to be thinking properly. They don't want you to be healthy. And basically it comes down to the quality of fat on the people within the society. The quality of fat is what determines the quality of the society. So it comes down to the most fundamental level is the energy system. Like the food is the body's energy system. That's how we all get our energy. And it's being messed with. So this is why we're in this society of crazy people, is because everybody's being mass poisoned and they can't get good quality stuff. So that's the number one problem is the foods.
All right. So then I need to focus on getting the food fixed, and then all the rest will follow.
Exactly. Once you get that in line, everything else just sorts itself out.
And until that gets in line, then all this is a waste of time.
This is why I said to you before that you magically think children get cancer. Well, no, there's actually tribes where people don't even have acne or cavities, let alone cancer. Cancer is created by poisoning. So children get cancer because of poisoning. So all the diseases that people have in society, the rising autism, mental illness, all of it is created and caused by food, like Monsanto, the government, making it impossible to get real foods, putting out disinformation, all of that shit. And feces is good for you.
And feces is good for you.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing we should all agree on.
So the Indians have it right.
Yeah, they eat high meat. They got it figured out.
Amazing. Well, you've really given me a lot to think about there, Blob.
Yep. It's hard to argue with that one.
Hard to argue with that one.
So I mean, when you first looked into like looking at long distance observations, your impression of it was some kind of like an evangelical preacher or something, like trying to hype something up, because it wasn't the case for me at all. Like when I looked into them, I mean, there's just thousands upon thousands. I've also done them myself of just seeing the Earth directly lay out in front of you in an extended planar fashion. So like, what part of that were you saying? I mean, I'm not saying there's not some videos out there that are maybe hyping things in some way, or you know. Someone was hot micing. But yeah, it's not necessarily that, you know, that somebody couldn't. I'm not questioning maybe if somebody made a video or they hyped it up or they did something, but I'm just saying that like that's your perception of it, because I mean it's a pretty directly observable thing, you know, in terms of like that really like when we go out and observe the Earth, it really doesn't observe like the sphere they tell us it is. It observes like an extended plane with refraction. And even that refraction still as on a foundational level, the planar, and I'm not trying to get into a whole debate on it, we could, but I'm just saying like what of that, like the direct reality of that has to do with somebody hyping something up or making some kind of a hoopla like in a video, if that's what you're referring to on it.
Well, the video is presented with the idea that there's no way you could see this far on a globe. And that's the lie. It's like every single one, and I've seen, I can't say I've seen them all, but you know, they've thrown me their best shot, you know, the flat earthers. Every single one I've engaged with, whether it's Canada Mountains or the oil rigs or the Black Swan or like whatever, every one of these is explained with our common understanding of the way that light and photography works. And that's how Dave McKeegan, who went to Antarctica, even got started into flat earth. Dave McKeegan's just a photographer, and he was reacting to these claims that this photograph is impossible on a globe. And then he just breaks it down and goes, actually, if you just look at where it was taken, what you're seeing, the elevation, the refraction index, the time of year when you saw it, is totally explainable. And in fact, something about this, in fact, proves the globe. Look at this mountain that's taller than the other one, appears lower. Well, that's because it's further across the horizon. And so he breaks down the photography angle because he's a photographer. That's how he got into flat earth anyway. And so but when you hear about these from a flat earther, really what they're doing is they're scamming you. They're selling it along with this idea that it's impossible on the globe, which is false.
Yeah. So this is the thing, is that for the longest time, and even still now, you hear people, especially if they're not super up to date on all of the biggest arguments, you hear for the longest time from so many people that no, you can never see too far, and that like the horizon is a literal physical horizon, and you'll never see things that are too far. Like I'm personally seeing things from 5 miles away that should be completely obstructed. I see the entire thing. And even though there are, like you could say there are, you know, valid, you know, refraction or whatever to account for that or explain that, that was something that was a lie that was told to people, is that you will never see things that are too far, even if it's, you know, innocent, just not knowing things. And then people do see that, then they're like, hey, wait a minute, there's something up to that. Now there is a valid point of discussion to be had about why do we see too far.
Yeah, I agree. But if the way I understand it is not that people discovered you can see too far and they extrapolated from that we must be on a flat plane. It started with, well, actually, no, I guess if you go back to Robotham and stuff, that was kind of his thing with his experiment on the river, which also he got debunked even in that time, and got into all sorts of debates and fights about it. But that was one of his first proofs, is like his like shitty experiment, right? And but that's the thing. It's like this is somebody who's trying to sell the idea that the Earth's flat, and then looking for ways to shill that idea through presenting basically photographic evidence, quote unquote, that matches up to a flat Earth. But then if you look at it, and then you go, wait, that doesn't actually, that's not true though. So they're basically trying to back up a lie with lies.
Well, even with just the physics of water, it's like when you pour water into a cup, it takes the shape of the cup. The surface is flat. Every single container you pour water into, the water behaves the same way. So, like, you're trying to act like the physics that we all know is somehow not the truth based on increasing scale. Like, you're actually talking about something that is a delusion they've created, that actually disconnects people from what they do know. So, I mean, it's not like you really have an argument.
The physics of water is that it flows downhill. It goes to the path of least resistance, which means that it'll fill a container. If you say it looks flat, it's like, okay, well, the sun looks like it goes in the ocean during the sunset. But things that look a certain way isn't always what they actually are. So if your pool looks flat or the cup looks flat, there's a meniscus on the water, and there's a membrane, there's what, you know, surface tension, there's also tides. I mean, water doesn't just lay flat. This is also another false thing that's claimed, like the physics of water proves flatness or something. It's not true. Like if the water takes the shape of its container, then if you put it on a globe floating in space that has enough gravity for it all to cling, then it will take the shape of a globe.
Well, that's just
So-
the
That
opposite.
would be the container.
Yeah,
So here is a good way of explaining it to you. So in the same way that, people will look at a lot of things about, 1940s Germany and camps, to where they're just straight up doctoring evidence. They're creating all of these, different photos. They're like building a chimney that wasn't there. Like they're doing all of these things when not even getting into like space stuff, but there's just an example of a time where like National Geographic, they deceptively edited and like spliced together separate videos in like clearly demonstrable ways to sort of exaggerate curvature and make it seem like there was curvature when there was not. And so you could say, oh, they like maybe the refractive index wasn't there, so they wanted to still fake this test to prove the curve because, one reason or another. But when people see something like that, to where there is this sort of, oh, there's this evidence of curvature that's being put on TV, and they see that, oh, hey, this was without a question like two videos that were spliced together dishonestly, then you would obviously understand why people would ask questions about that. And even if they're wrong, like react very bigly against that, because, they've seen, the doctored evidence in 1950s Germany. And then they see that this thing is also having like fake doctored evidence to sort of prove it. So it's not really a big question for why people would suddenly go down the line of thinking, oh, why are they faking curvature? Oh, because there's no curvature.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's sort of like we have an assuming the consequent fallacy going on in that assumption, though, right? So, if we were doing this type of rigorous thinking, oh, the video is edited. So it's like if there was curvature, there wouldn't be an edited video. There is an edited video, therefore there's no curvature. It's like it's
no,
not
the way the video was edited was specifically in a way that would
you're talking about
like,
maybe I'm assuming you're talking about the Hawkins video with the disappearing helicopter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some editor who's putting together the video, like a an easy explanation, it could be that there's actually no curvature on the lake and it's a flat earth and it's a big deception, or it could be that the editor said this looks really good if I do it this way. The footage that we got didn't look as good as I wanted to look, so I'm going to go ahead and doctor the edit at the end to make it look more amazing. And so I'm going to splice the helicopter disappearing over the lake, he didn't think anybody would notice the ducks. And so it's like, all right, so some editor did some film magic to make his final edit of the thing appear awesome. That doesn't mean that the Earth's flat. It just means that somebody edited that video. That's all that.
Yeah, and you can make the exact same arguments against all of the doctored evidence in 1950s Germany. Like it's essentially the same thing.
I don't look. I question the 6 million number. I think that's like extremely exaggerated. But some people go, oh, they built a chimney. That means Hitler didn't kill any Jews. Like it's like, no, that's not what it means. It just means that somebody made that. It means that they have a narrative that they're selling. Maybe they're really attached to this one special number, which by the way was appearing in the news before the war even broke out. But where the bodies went, who knows? Like maybe they all went over the border into the USSR and they died over there. I don't know. Maybe they burned them all in a ditch that we haven't found. I don't know. Maybe they didn't kill that many. Maybe they killed a bunch, but it wasn't 6 million. But there is a industrial there's like a profiteering complex. There's a Holocaust narrative, a victim narrative, like this big thing. They build museums everywhere and they tell the big story and they make the Hollywood movies. So yeah, they went and doctored the evidence with the chimney and they made the story about the Zyklon B into what they want it to be. That doesn't mean that there was no rounding up and executing of Jews. It doesn't mean that didn't happen. It just means that they embellished. Embellishing is embellishing. Finding proof of an embellishment doesn't disprove or prove anything, is what I'm saying. So I don't know.
Deceptive.
So, but for what end? Is it because they
Well,
made up the
you
whole
think it's
thing
for no
completely?
reason? Yeah, you think they're just being deceptive.
I'm not saying for no reason. They clearly profit off of it. They get all sorts of never forget, we're the victims, innocent Jews, 6 million. They get to say 6 million every time. They get to teach it to kids, the Anne Frank letters. They make up this narrative because it's really important to their agenda. Like the creation of Israel in 1947 or at the UN, like we need justification for that. And it's part of their justification for their state and all sorts of things. So they have an absolute motive for creating this narrative that really traumatizes everybody.
Yeah, just like they have a motive for lying about space. They create this whole area that we need to explore, put a bunch of money into it, and they use the money, they steal it, they use it to fund research to create lab-grown meat. They just create weapons. Like, you think they're just taking all this money for the space station, and you think they're just like using it's all legit? Like,
no, I don't assume that at all. Dude, if you could prove to me that like $9 out of $10 that go to NASA gets embezzled into some bastard's pocket, like, okay, big surprise. Bureaucracies are really inefficient and corrupt. I wouldn't be surprised. But does that disprove NASA? Does that disprove that rockets go to space? Does this mean that the space station is fake? No, it just means that liars are liars, scammers are scammers, ripoffs are ripoffs. It doesn't prove or disprove anything.
But if they're liars, then that would put into question that the other things they're saying would be then put into question as well, if they're already corrupt. Right?
Look, if I find out that my mom and dad were lying to me about Santa Claus, that doesn't mean, oh, well, how do I know you're even my real mom or dad? It's like you can go too far, is the thing. It's like, well, they lied to me about Santa Claus. That means everything that they told me was a lie. No,
so how have you decided that saying the Earth isn't a globe is going too far?
How have I okay, well, because it's demonstrably a globe, and the arguments that it's flat are all, hinged on this idea that there's people that want it to be flat. That's what I think's going on, for one reason or another. And some of them are scammers and profiteers. We got Flat Earth Dave shilling his app, and we got Eric Dubé doing whatever the hell he's doing.
I agree.
And
there's also shills on the other side.
And then there's other people who got sort of traumatized into it, like the gentleman who mentioned he saw the long distance photographs and he had to go lay down. And now they're sort of like justifying a worldview that they got, hypnotized into. So they're going to die on the hill of like, no, I can't be this dumb. I have to be right. I know I'm right. I got convinced, and I wouldn't fall for a scam. There's people that are just like defending their egos.
So when flat earthers are shills and are liars, then it means the Earth can't be flat. But when the globers, the NASA's all lying, it means that the Earth is still a globe, but they're all just liars and they steal all the money. And like, you see how you have a double standard there?
I think I don't think it's the same. I don't think it's the same thing. I think it's apples and oranges there. I think we actually really do have satellites. I think we actually do have people going to space. I don't think every single photograph, there's 18,000 photographs to and from the planet just during the Apollo mission alone. I don't think every single one of those is a fabrication. I don't think I don't think
90% is fake.
I don't think there's a dome up there that we haven't found. I don't think we can substantiate that. I don't think it's the same thing.
Do you think they would tell you if the Earth was flat and if there was a dome? You think that NASA would just tell you that?
If the Earth was flat, do I think NASA would tell me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose not. Yeah, right. So yeah,
because
if it was flat and they were lying the whole time, they would never come out and tell it. That's true. I guess that's a good point. Totally true. They would lie, because they'd all be exposed as a bunch of scammers, right? If it was actually flat. But I don't think that's how deep the lie goes. If there are any lies at all, like, I don't know, they might be lying about where they spend the money. That seems more likely. It seems like they're like, it's like if you told me, they made up the chimneys, therefore Hitler wasn't even real. It's like, well, they lied about the chimneys. Why didn't they lie about Hitler?
Do you believe in the moon landing, BigTech?
Yeah, I think the moon landing happened.
All of them?
I don't know which one I would doubt. Yeah, I think they all happened.
What do you think about the Mars project book?
If one happened, that's enough to believe in them all. If they fudged one and succeeded the other ones, I don't get the difference.
What do you think about the book that Werner von Braun wrote in the 50s, talking about the leader of Mars is going to be called Elon? Have you seen that?
Yeah, I think that's really weird. I think there's weird things in the world. What about the fact that, when Marty McFly skated up to the Twin Pines Mall, it was 1:16 a.m. If you turn that over, it's 9/11.
Yeah. Do you think that maybe they're like they have planned psyops that are like hundreds of years that have been planned for hundreds of years?
No, I think
Think-
there's strange synchronicities that appear in reality, and because reality is actually very mysterious in the way that it works.
Okay, but they're not lying about a globe.
Yeah, those don't have anything to do with each other.
Okay.
Why does all the footage look so fake, BigTech? All of it. I've just posted two. These are supposedly real images of the globe, and they look fake to me. And Elon himself, bless him, what did he say? They must be real because they look so fake. Why would he say something like that?
Let me see what you posted. Because they don't look fake to me. I mean, you
They
say
don't
that,
look fake to you. Okay.
No, but I'm gonna go see what you posted.
Do you need me
Like
to
the
tag you in the
fakest,
thing?
You're still posting those images from the million mile away satellite?
it's the fakest looking thing I've ever seen.
Okay. What would you expect it to look like? Something else, huh?
Not like that.
Not like that.
God.
Yeah, so the backside of the moon looks a little different than the front side you're used to, so it's fake. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Have you seen these astronauts when they asked simple questions and they can't answer them? Did you see stars? Like half of them say yes, some of them say no. They can't make their minds up. These astronauts.
Yeah, I've seen all of those. And then the thing is, if you go look at those in context, this is always just like a flat earther who's presenting something in a deceptive way. For example, they'll say, "No, I don't remember seeing stars." And, "Do you remember seeing stars?" Well, if you go back to hear the question, it was very specific. Did you see stars when you were looking at the sun? Were there stars visible behind the solar corona? Like, that's a very specific question. And they're like, "Huh, when we looked at the sun from the moon, could we still see stars then? I don't remember." And then you just take that clip and it makes it sound like these guys are just liars who can't remember the story, but they were asking a very specific question in that context.
And there's a video I can post. You can probably take a quick look at if you like, where a speech analyst goes over Neil Armstrong's first sort of proper interview, and he couldn't believe it. He was like you, I guess. He just believed in the moon landings. He wasn't a conspiracy guy in any way, and he went over it line by line as they do. They analyze every word they say, and he was like, "Yeah, from this, there's no way this sort of happened. There's no way, I'll post the video for you. It's pretty interesting. I mean, I kind of agree with you that. Well, I've said before that they could have faked the first one, and they could have gone after maybe. I don't know. My instinct tells me that just by looking at the moon, sometimes when I just stare at it, I think that's not a place I can go to. But that's neither here nor there, is it really?
Yeah, I
You know?
admitted in the beginning, it's an unbelievable thing. The idea that they went is incredible. It's like no fucking way. Like, that's crazy to be able to pull that off. So I understand anybody who has doubt, because it is like beyond the pale. It's like an unbelievable achievement if they did that. But then the more that I look at it, I don't think that what I'm looking at is a giant deception. I'm looking at a bunch of people that were working real hard to pull something off, and I think they did it. And like, some people will even say like, "Oh, you think they brought a dune buggy to the moon?" Well, I've gone and analyzed that dune buggy footage, and that's one of my favorite ones. The reason why for me is because I have a background in off-road racing. I used to work in the industry, used to build race trucks, sand cars, rock crawlers, all this stuff. So I've been to the desert a million times in any kind of off-road vehicle you can imagine, from a dirt bike to a side-by-side to high-speed race truck, 30 inches of suspension, going 80 miles an hour over everything. And I've been out there for days and days, days and days. I've eaten a ton of dust. And when I look at that dune buggy drive around, that's not how vehicles move on the earth. Even if you double the speed or at any speed you put it at, it's not how it moves. And the way that the dust kicks up, that's not the way that dust kicks up off the back of a tire, any kind of tire, even if it's a wire mesh radial tire. And the reason why specifically is because a big high arcing bunch of dust going up in the air doesn't just go right back down to the ground. If you're hauling ass around enough to kick up that much dust, what you do is you leave a cloud in the air of the fine particulates. Any place, any desert that I've ever been to on the earth, and I've been to all different types, sand dunes and all the rest. There's a fine particulate that stays hovering in the air. It's because there's air there. So that the dust cloud left behind by any off-road vehicle is always apparent. And the moon, there's no dust cloud. The dust goes up and it goes right back down. And the reason why there's no cloud is because there's no oxygen. I don't know how they could have faked that in the 70s. I don't think they had that technology to do CGI dust that works I think that guy's on the moon on a weird little buggy. Like when I look at it, it looks to me like he's on a buggy on the moon.
Couldn't it be as simple, or at least a possibly viable explanation, that it's not the same dust as, the random dirt that you find on the ground? That the dirt is something of a different quality that would be able to mimic this effect?
I'm telling you, okay, so you found some place on the earth that has special dust that doesn't create a cloud in the air.
No, it's in a studio.
News to me.
But there's actually a paper on this. There's a full-on paper analyzing the dust spray, and they concluded at the end that it must be moon. But the one thing they didn't actually verify within that whole research paper was what was it? They didn't check the slowing down the camera speed, because they were talking about replication of that dust spray. The only thing that they didn't check was the just slowing down of frame rates on the footage. It was rather peculiar when I read through that. I'll see if I can find it. It's not a great read, but
I think the dead killer.
It's kind of funny that you guys mentioned.
It's even the arc that it travels in. It's like it goes way up higher and then it goes down in a different arc than it travels on the Earth, because the Earth has a different gravity. So no matter what it was, it's falling at a certain rate. So there's no cloud. It travels in a parabolic curve that's different than the one that would be in our gravity. So they basically would have to have done that in low gravity with no air around. So they would have had to turn gravity down and remove all the air from the studio.
You don't think some baby powder mixed into the sand would have done something similar? You don't know how big those particles are that are spraying up, supposedly.
Yeah, I mean, saying they couldn't fake it is kind of just very weak. It's a very weak argument.
To me, I'm just saying for me on that one, it's like, that's not what it looks like. I've been in all the different environments. That's not what dust looks like. I know what dust looks like. I've seen it a million times. So it's like, you can show me a counterfeit bill and I can probably spot it because I've seen a million real ones. I mean, maybe you could pull one by me. It's baby. So it's like they're driving around a baby powder that doesn't linger in the air.
I mean,
excuse me, you just brought up one of my arguments. How would you know what counterfeit moon dust looks like?
I'm sorry?
So you said if it was a counterfeit $100 bill, you'd be able to spot it. That's actually one of my favorite arguments. How would you know what footage from space or footage from the moon looks like? Because you have nothing to compare it to. So
no,
you just take it.
I know what footage on the Earth looks like, and that's not what it looks like. So people are saying that this took place on the Earth, and I'm saying doesn't look like Earth. That's not how. That's not how dirt moves on the Earth. That's something else.
You're talking about footage on the moon, right? That's the thing that could be counterfeited. Because is it easier to counterfeit a trip to the moon or land on the moon?
You're not comprehending that. That is not happening on the planet. That's not happening on the Earth. Is what I'm saying. I know what dirt moves like on the Earth, and it doesn't move like that. So that's happening somewhere else.
Yeah, but that's a good question, I think. Is it easier and less expensive to fake a moon landing with different types of dust or to actually go to the moon?
Yeah, because these are two different questions of one, is it in principle hypothetically possible? And then did it actually happen? These are two entirely different questions. Because there are a ton of things that I could easily see are like, oh yeah, this is faked. Of just, I'm going to use an example of like some random presidential address of Donald Trump talking. I think that the technology is absolutely there to make AI videos that have that are entirely indistinguishable to essentially most people. Like some people might see, oh, there's something a little bit off. I'm like getting a little bit of a weird vibe about this, but there wouldn't be anything definitive that they could say of, oh, here's why it's AI. But that's not to say that every single presidential address that Trump makes is an AI video, because these are two different questions of one, could it possibly happen? And then two, did it happen?
Yeah, the answer is it would be cheaper to fake the footage and just make a film than to actually go, of course. But the question is, did they? Just because it would be cheaper to fake it, does that mean they did do it? No.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
really
So this is this is just the point of if you're trying to argue that like these certain particular aspects are impossible to fake with, Hollywood literally understanding as much as you possibly could about knowing how to fake things. If you try to argue on that front, then it sort of conflates it to the idea of like whether or not they did fake it. Because if you, in the same way of what I was talking about earlier, is if you were saying like, all right, I'm gonna be honest, like this is something that could hypothetically be faked, but no, they didn't fake it. That would be a position that is much more tenable than saying, oh, there's no way that Hollywood could mimic this one specific thing.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think I don't believe that it's been demonstrated that Hollywood in the 60s and 70s had CGI to this degree, to where they could fake that they fake that dust. I mean, everything we've seen, this doesn't match anything we ever saw from any Hollywood, any Kubrick film. It's not. That would be an unprecedented pull off. So basically, NASA is the best film studio of all time. Is what you'd have to convince me of.
I mean, that would be a simple thing that most people in any vague conspiracy idea have, is that the technology that they have is at least 20, 30 years ahead of them. And in a lot of cases, there's levels of technology, levels of deception that they will never reveal in that sense. Because if you reveal that, you're capable of doing in the movies, then you can't do it when you're creating, falsified footage of like any other particular event.
Well, yeah, and would it be more unprecedented that Hollywood could fake moon dust, or that we actually went to the moon? I would submit that it's actually more unprecedented that we actually went to the moon.
Even Elon Musk denies the moon landing.
I haven't seen him do that. All of this begs the question, why don't they just fake it again then? They keep kicking the can down the road with the Artemis mission and stuff like that. And so the claim is that they're presently and currently and continually faking the space station. So they're really good at faking space and zero gravity then, if that's the case. Then why don't they just fake another moon mission and just put it all to rest? If they're happy to fake the space station, why wouldn't they just fake another moon mission?
I think that, it's kind of a leap of faith to say that they're good at faking it, because people are so good at calling out, the fake stuff, that I don't really see how they could possibly be good at faking it, because there's a documentary, American Moon, and it's like, 3.5 hours long of just, all the people coming and, basically saying like, this is how they did, this is how they faked it, this is what they're doing. You got professional, like 30-year photographers going, I don't want to get political. I'm not saying whether they landed on the moon or not, but these pictures right here are fake. Like this isn't a one light source. And it's like, well, these images are like directly from the moon, allegedly. Like, oh, well, I'm not going to get into that. So I don't think they do a good job of faking it at all.
But my question was, if they're okay, fine. And there's people who question the ISS footage and they say, this looks fake. Look at her hair and look how this guy moved. And look at did he grab his pocket with the pinky, or did he grab an invisible wire? They're obviously in a green screen. They're on wires, and it's a parabolic plane or whatever. So they're happy to put out footage that people even presently have problems with. So why wouldn't they just do another fool the sheep, the blue-pilled masses, with another fake moon landing? Just say, we did it again. We're awesome. Why are they faking the ISS and not another moon mission? That doesn't make sense to me.
I mean, there would be a lot of reasons why you would do that. They don't even get into the conspiratorial idea of like, oh, it's impossible to go, or they wouldn't want to go. There would be the idea of further embodying the idea of, like things are becoming incompetent because of DEI hires. And then if all of a sudden you have, these DEI hires doing something that's like very big, then that it would betray the narrative that is actually there. And if anything, that would make a lot of people question it. If you see, NASA doing all this, diversity and inclusion stuff, and they're full of, people that like couldn't, tie their shoes or whatever, and then they all of a sudden are able to do that, then that would, that's just one example of how that would betray the narrative of other things, because people would think, oh, like they were able to do all of these really intense things and they have all this diversity stuff. Now I'm going to question it from that angle.
I don't get that at all. They're sending women and blacks and Russians and Chinese, everybody's going to the space station, but they can't just send a black woman to go circle around the moon and come back. Don't even have to land. What if they just went out there, just went and did a moon orbit and come back? And then everybody go like, we went back to the moon. Okay, we're going to land again, but we just wanted to test our new equipment and do a pre,
No, it's not about the astronauts. It's about like institutions in general. There is this prevailing idea in society that the reason these institutions are failing is because of, and just incompetent, unable to do anything, all the Boeing stuff, is because of all of this DEI stuff. So if all of a sudden, if all of a sudden,
decades, you're saying all these decades since the 70s, they haven't had ever a moment that it would be beneficial to them to fake another moon mission? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I'm just giving you one example of why they would not do that now, of how it would betray the narrative. There's a whole bunch of other.
The DEI is bad.
That these institutions are failing because of DEI, not that these institutions are failing because they hate you and they want your institutions to be crumbling.
So you think DEI is actually just like a setup? Like they're pushing DEI so that when everything goes bad, they can blame it on DEI rather than saying
it is absolutely part of the Hegelian dialectic, the false dichotomy that people are being given. And I'm not saying like, diversity and inclusion are actually good things. Like, I mean, it would have to make logical sense that this would be a reason why they're failing, that people could understand. But it is just it is sort of a convenient excuse or a scapegoat when one way or another the institutions would have failed because they want the institutions to fail.
Well, then they could do a moon mission and then have it fail, and then the astronauts die, and they could say that was because of DEI hires.
I mean, wasn't that what the Challenger was?
No, no, they didn't blame that. They didn't blame that on DEI hires, and they kept going to the space station too. And they keep telling us that NASA's awesome. Nobody thinks NASA sucks because of DEI based on the Challenger mission.
That was some mass trauma inflicted on children, is what that was.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe, but I mean, I guess my point is like if. I was in this whole thing. Witsit was in here the other night. Like, how come they don't go back? It's because they know they can't go past the Van Allen radiation belt, and they're telling us this whole thing. But the real thing is because there's a dome, and they faked the first one, and they can't go back, and they know it, so they're kicking the can down the road. It's like, well, why? If they fake the first one, and they're also faking the space station, why don't they just fake another one? Oh, they get caught. It's like, well, they're faking the space station. They can't fake another moon mission. We have better fake, better film technology now.
Yeah, we're gonna send Witsit. It's gonna be fake.
So there's one thing of the, you could think about this in movie terms, because movies are a good way of seeing the way that like the culture kind of is at a time, in the way of what is the general optimism or like pessimism that people are willing to accept. Like if you released a lot of movies that are released today, 20, 30 years ago, like people would be looking for people in the streets, you know what I'm saying? So in that sense,
they could have faked a moon mission and then had it blow up and blamed it on Al Qaeda. Like they could do a 9/11 with a moon.
Yeah, no. My point is that in the 80s, there were a whole bunch of movies of like tough like action stars and like this, we're just gonna go super hard, man mode, masculine, defeat the Russians or something. And in the 60s, there was that boomer level of optimism where oh, hey, we're going to have a super big space tourism future very soon. Whereas if you look at essentially any time since the 90s, which was, after the Challenger explosion happened, there's this general level of pessimism in society to where, things are stalling, things are not really happening, like the whole nothing ever happens meme.
No, I think that's actually probably a better argument on my side is for why, the real answer when you clip these people saying like, oh, we're doing studies so that we can go past the Van Allen radiation belt with Artemis and do it safely and everything. I think that the Challenger incident is a better, I mean, before that, they were very gung ho, and we had a disaster with Apollo 13, but they made it back alive. And it was still just like, yeah, we're courageous and we do things and, maybe we spill some blood and stuff. But once the Challenger thing happened and everybody got traumatized, now they're just like, we're going to make sure we're not going to go again until we know 100% we're going to have success. There's going to be no problems. Everything's going to be cool. We're not going to go on to fail. That would be, we're not going to put everybody through that again. So
I think it's weird how like when a flat earther does something deceptive, you think that's evidence that flat Earth is BS. But when NASA's doing all this deceptive crap and faking photos and faking all this stuff, you think it's
like
still
what?
all
I haven't
legit.
seen any of that. Everybody says that that's happening. I just never see any actual examples.
Oh,
okay, no, wait. Hang on. So there's my point of like there is, I would posit, and you would probably posit to a lesser degree, that there is a large level of trying to control the general vibe of culture, right? To where they are like they want people to think certain things, be demoralization campaigns, all of that kind of stuff. So in the way of the 60s with the moon missions, there was a super big level of optimism of like, oh yeah, we're going to be doing a whole bunch of cool things.
We will go to the moon this decade because
and that changed culture dramatically. Whereas now, in a world of Nirvana and Linkin Park telling you to kill yourself, like making another moon mission or faking another moon mission would be counteractive to those things, because like that's the kind of stuff that gets kids dreaming. You know what I mean? There's a level of optimism that would do. Whereas now, if you want, with everything of the way that culture is going and sort of this demoralization campaign, you wouldn't want to do another moon landing because that would do that. And so if you have a bunch of missions that are, 10% of as cool, or really 1% of as cool as the big mission that he did in the 60s, then that, if anything, further goes into the demoralization campaign because we're not making any progress. And that is what they essentially want to do on the culture front. So that would be a valid reason for why they wouldn't want to either fake another moon mission or do another moon mission, even if it was possible.
All right. Well, I mean, I think it's a reach that it goes all the way to NASA. NASA's just like, no, don't go to the moon, because we want to keep everybody's vibe low. We want them to be more pessimistic and nihilistic, and we want them to kill themselves. I mean, that's so that's why they don't fake. I mean, it's like, well, but they let Elon build cooler and cooler rockets, and everybody freaks out and goes like, "Whoa, look at that thing he just landed! That was insane!" And
yeah, but essentially,
demoralizing. Essentially, everything. I don't like the flat Earth, because the flat Earth. I see a bunch of flat earthers out there saying that was fake too. It's like that was a moralizing moment that everybody goes like, "Hey, if we work hard, put our heads together, think smart, we can pull off incredible things." Like, look at that 30-story building coming out of the sky at the speed of sound and then landing right where it was launched from. That's epic. And then I see flat earthers going, that was fake and stupid CGI. It's like, hey guys.
Essentially everything that Elon and SpaceX has done is more or less a promise to the future. Like it's not actually doing something that is very like tangible. It's like, oh hey, we're going to have cheaper rockets and reusable rockets so that one day, I promise, something is going to happen. Whereas it's kind of kicking the can down the road, and it's not the same level of optimism as actually doing the first mission to send somebody to Mars, or like actually making a temporary moon base that can be used to be the launching pad to go to Mars. Like those would be real tangible things that get people excited. Whereas all the SpaceX stuff is either like Elon dick riders or NASA worshippers that are like really into it. It doesn't really have that sort of same cross-cultural pollination.
No, I totally disagree, dude. When everybody saw that thing come down and land, that got everybody fired up. Like, hell yeah. Everybody felt like we did it. That's what that felt like. That was what the shared
That's just
experience.
people identifying as, astronauts, basically. Like,
Yeah, and in 2 weeks, nobody talked about it.
It's not true. We're still talking about it, and they're doing another one on Monday.
It's just not
Hey,
comparable to
Big Tech,
landing on a moon.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask you, you ever been to like a magic show where the guy's just like not very good, or like you've seen how the trick is done before and you get it, but people you're with are like, wow. You're kind of looking at them like, okay, well, if you got the trick, then you'd realize it wasn't that difficult to do, you know. And I'm not saying it's a direct comparison, but that's how a lot of people here feel about you saying that it seems totally believable, you know. And I don't know what that is about the discernment in general, or your willingness to believe or want to believe and all that, which you kind of admitted to. I've been listening to you, and you're really interesting to hear the perspective of, actually. So I appreciate.
Are we talking
you
about
spending time here.
We're talking about the SpaceX rocket or the moon?
Well, any of it, any of it. You know, like
think those rockets
what about
don't land?
Tesla? What about the Tesla car in space? Did you see that?
Yeah.
When Elon sent the Tesla car, nothing about that like caught your eye. Like, oh wait, that doesn't look very real. Nothing about that seemed at all fake.
Well, it looks odd. It's something we've never seen before, but you think you think he couldn't you think he can put satellites in space but not a car? Or you think he doesn't put satellites in space?
No, it's not about that. It's like that one. I have friends that are total globies and don't want to talk to me about flat Earth, but they were laughing at that themselves. Like that, they thought it was just an advertisement for Tesla. I mean, it is an unbelievable feat, just like you admitted. You know. Yeah, I mean, I guess you have to look at it again, maybe a little bit closer, and then there's also like a little cut that they did where it shows the car in a studio. And that, I don't know if that was in the original footage or if it was put in there, honestly, but people have pointed that out. Like there's a little blip and it shows the car like in the studio with the 360 cams all around it and everything. But you don't even need that to look at it and be like, wait a minute, there's no stars. It's like a total water planet, perfectly circular, very CGI looking. And I don't know, I guess maybe it's just a matter of discernment or willingness to want to believe or not believe or whatever it is. But I just point. I think you're in the process, and it's a process we've all gone through. And not to sound patronizing or anything, but you were kind of new to this, I guess, back when you first talked to Witsit. I remember that conversation. And then you were asking questions that you don't ask anymore, and you were saying that you thought he might be a liar, right? Now the other day you said that you think he's totally believing it, like you think he is totally honest in his belief about this, right? So, are there other assumptions that
yeah, and
you've
I told him
also kind of like?
I think it's worse. I think it's worse now that I've determined that he's not just.
Well, maybe, but okay, maybe it is.
Believer.
But if it's actually not, if we're not on a planet that's not worse, right? So that's kind of where you're at. Like you don't know if you're on a planet or not. You're saying it's the story you want to believe, right? It's the story you prefer, but you don't have like hardcore evidence for it, and you admit the moon landing's unbelievable, beyond belief, even though you think they did it, because some of these other things that people have dispelled, like it would be harder to fake it, which isn't true. It would be easier to fake it than to actually go there, right? So I was just going to try to ask if there's other assumptions you kind of like given up since you've gotten further into this conversation at this point.
Assumptions
about flat Earth, or about the like what I mean. You think everybody else besides Witsit's lying, or the what I'm saying? Like, do you think that people just believe it, or do you think they just stop believing that they live on a planet? That's the big difference that people don't get.
He does lie. He's very, very clever with it, and I think he compartmentalizes it to himself. And he would say that he really believes it, but like he speaks in a deceptive way. I mean, it's like it's almost an art form. But he says things without saying them, and he lies by omission. He leaves certain key details out.
So now you're saying you think he's lying to convince people that the Earth is flat?
Yeah, I think no. So it goes both ways. It's both.
Like he knows better.
I think he's convinced himself that it's flat, and so he believes basically a lie that he talked himself into. I think he's like he's telling you something that he really believes in. He's walking around in a world that he thinks is flat, but then he also twists the truth to support that narrative when it serves him to do so. So those are the lies. So he just plays fast and loose with the words in order to win arguments about this thing that he thinks is true. So it's doing both.
That's like a generalization, though. You'd have to, if you're going to call someone a liar, you kind of have to point out a specific, point at which he lied, and then say why it is a lie, and also get the intention part of it figured out. But that's not really that important. I just think it's interesting because everyone in here just about has a story or a moment that they can describe where it's not about deciding to believe in flat Earth. Or being convinced, like the straw that broke the camel's back or something. It's the moment where they realize that they're not on a spinning ball, that we're not on a planet. What that means about the rest of it, the parameters, how wide it is, how big it is. It's your back to your base axioms, where everything's stationary.
Exactly. So at the moment that
like it seems, and
they adopted the idea that the globe is a lie. Whether
What's
or not
wrong
it's
with
flat.
that?
Well, no, not just that. It's that you realize you realize that it's not a planet for all these different reasons, but it's usually one thing that really gets someone. They're like, okay, that's it. Like I give up. Like that, if that can't happen, everyone kind of has their own little example of that. But it's not about believing in anything. It's not about adopting a new belief or even believing in the conspiracy. It's about losing complete and utter control of belief in the spinning ball. Like
attachment.
Totally
I was going to say attachment.
Yeah, or it's like a spell that you totally now are over. You're completely over the spell.
That's what I'm saying. I think you're describing. You think that you're waking up from a spell, and what I'm saying is you actually fell into a spell. That's the moment that you fell into the spell.
Admittedly, right? That might be an assumption on your part, right? Because you're a little bit new to this. We've been here like 10 years, a lot of us, right? So after 10 years with above average intelligence and someone that's skeptical like yourself, and you were saying that you think it's important for people to know that 9/11 was an inside job and all these kind of things. So I'm just trying to get you to speculate, like hypothetically, if you had that moment yourself, how might that change the way you see things or what you talk about or what you think is important?
Well, so in terms of the spell thing, like looking at who is behind heliocentrism, in terms of who those were, compared to if you're just trying to compare them based on a kind of the idea of a spell, like a stationary planar Earth has been the cosmology since the dawn of time for eons of time, and then basically one could say spellcasters came along. When you look at the characters they claim are, discovered it was a globe. But I mean, I guess that could be debatable. Obviously Newton was an alchemist and he's involved in that. So you could say that kind of level of spells like alchemy, if you want to go that route, or like the stuff that he was maybe into. But I'm not even trying to go that way exactly. I'm just saying heliocentrism was basically conjured by some men. So I'm just saying in terms of something potentially to be a spell, whereas a stationary plane Earth has been just foundational in terms of how we build things and how we measure and water and the layout of the stars for the ancients and so on. So that's just on the basis of that in terms of which is a spell question mark kind of thing. Well, one of them has been a foundational cosmology since the dawn of time and so on. I know that's the whole discussion with that, but I'm just saying that one. And then the other one was asserted by certain men that claimed to have had, wealth and influence to where they could tell other men, this is the globe, this is the model, this is the thing. And they still didn't really have much of it proven until, and even the Michelson-Morley and the Einstein, everything going on with that. But it wasn't really until after World War II that they were able to have enough money and resources to expand the propaganda spell, if I'm going to call that one the spell for the moment, to kind of expand that, to get it on the media, the news, and then build it all up to the moon landing where they could really whitewash the public and say, hey, you're on a globe, this is it. We took a picture, we went to the moon. So I'm just saying, which one just from that level is more likely to be a spell?
Yeah, and back to my point, just to summarize that a little bit as well, everything about the stationary planar Earth aligns with your base axiom.
Wait, hold on, dude. Before we plug it up with a whole nother set of things, I just laid something. I'd be curious at least to hear him respond, and then can we go to the next point?
Oh, okay. I thought you were tailing on what I was asking about assumptions, but go ahead. Yeah, if you want to respond to that first.
No, I guess that kind of was. I just laid that out. Since I kind of targeted towards him, just if he could have a response, then you could bring up the second point.
Go ahead, BigTech. I'm not sure where we're at. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't the foundation of that seemed like it hinged on this has been since the dawn of time, but we don't have that in record. What we have is a very sparse record of what people thought more than 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. It kind of falls apart, but we don't know why they built the pyramids exactly, and why they're aligned with astronomical and astrological entities. And it seems like sometimes at some points they're even aligned with things that you can't even see with the naked eye. So we don't know what they were looking at. We don't know what they believed about the stars or about the earth. These ancient civilizations that are gone, we don't know what they believed. We have some, and most of them are religious. But I think that's more akin to saying, like, well, people have believed in Jesus for 2,000 years. So the idea that Jesus isn't real, you're casting people into a spell because people have believed it a long time. Well, no, I think people fall into the spell when they go meet the pastor and they hear the prayers and the music. Then they start believing in Jesus because they go through an emotional, catharsis or something. They've now fallen under the spell of Christianity, which is designed by priests. And
what did they think? Well, what did they think the Earth was before the globe? Do you think? Because you were saying we don't have proof that they thought it was a stationary plane. So what did they think it was before the globe theory came along?
Who the ancient Egyptians? I don't know what they thought it was.
Just no, not even just the Egyptians, just all humans. What did they think before the globe?
I don't know what all humans thought.
Well, you just made an argument saying that you're saying they didn't think it was a stationary plane. There's no proof of that and all this. So
aren't ancient Egyptians part of all humans?
Yeah, but like any ancients before the globe, what did they think the Earth was?
Are you talking about all ancients except for the Egyptians?
Anyone before the globe, any human being that existed before the globe theory was brought in and starting to be told that it was a globe. Every single human.
What point did the globe theory come in? So what time period are we talking about before? You talking about before Eratosthenes, or are you talking about before? What are we talking about?
I don't know. I'm wondering. New Perspective at his point, it may be too big of a point. We could go down this entire. Because that's getting into history and stuff.
My point is that our history only goes back about 2,000 years. We don't have very
Wait a
much
minute.
before that.
No, I hear you. That's going a direction of the validity of the history. It's just a huge topic and stuff. But I hear you. No, it's cool. I can kind of. We don't have to go back and forth. I just wanted to say that thing about because you just mentioned the spell thing, and then just kind of. That it was men that came along and said it was a globe, basically, versus just humans who had the cosmology before. But yeah, we could. There's many aspects to. But I think you responded to it enough. We could either pick it up another time or.
In summary, my idea is that older isn't necessarily better. Being ignorant of the globe doesn't mean you're correct. That's how I see it. It's like when people discovered the curve and discovered different maths, discovered methods of measuring. And we also discovered electricity along the way. We discovered all sorts of different types of dynamics. We discovered steam power later too. It's like we discovered discoveries.
Well, sorry.
So what did people think before the discovery? Well, something else.
Yeah, but they had a stationary planar Earth cosmology. All of them. The Aztecs, the North, the Mayans, the Egyptians, the Chinese. Just even the Greek, the original Greek. So I'm just saying they all had that. So it was just the response to like. The idea you were saying basically quote unquote flat earth is a spell. Now if we're talking about flat earth just as the earth being stationary, planar, etc., I was just laying out the idea that that's just some like modern day spell that some, internet YouTuber concocted or something. That's kind of the vibe you were making it seem. So maybe you weren't saying that, but I'm just saying if you're saying it's a spell, I was just trying to link it to the idea that as far as we know in terms of our history, like all the ancients, like the Vedics, the Norse, every single one had a stationary planar earth. And then the globe came along. So I'm just saying, in terms of one being a spell and one not, one of them, and I hear you, we could get into a whole discussion of the history of the validity of that and all these different factors. But I was just sort of laying out, and maybe unless we're going to get into further points, maybe we just have to leave it at there because I was just sort of more of a rhetorical question of or just kind of more of the logic of it as well, and just considering if one of them's a spell, meaning a deception, if you want to say that, or a false idea that is trying to be promulgated to get people dazed and confused or whatever it may be. I'm just saying the one is a cosmology that's seems like rooted in all of humanity and so on, and spiritually and in many ways, whereas it seems in the Bible, going back and back, in other traditions as well, the Vedas and so on. And then the other one seems like sort of this somewhat more modern idea that was brought together by what they claim, these few ancient Greeks and then the Copernicus and then so there's sort of these, a few men kind of idea that came to those. And so in terms of one being a concocted, conjured thing, the other one being, so I'm not saying it's like a completion of a full argument. I was just sort of reflecting off those points.
Gio, it's actually, can you hear me? It's actually a perfect lead in back to what I was talking about, because what I was saying is that the stationary planar Earth aligns with your base axiom. So you don't have to believe in something. It's just whatever it seems like is what it is, right? And not to say that that can't be a belief of its own, technically. But if it's your base axioms, like you're sitting in a chair, you're sitting in a chair. You don't have to believe you're sitting in a chair unless there's really good reason that it's not a chair and all those kind of things that then you have to use your imagination for. So what the question was, I was trying to,
like you have to believe you're moving, you can't experience it, basically.
exactly. Right. So I was one of the things we usually ask people, like in your position, BigTech, is if you were just born on this earth and you were never told anything about being on a spinning ball or the planets or any of that kind of knowledge that you've gained about the stars and what that means, or anything about the sky, the interpretations of the sky, is there anything self-evident about living on a spinning ball that you can name? One thing that without any kind of somebody telling you you're on a planet and there's all these other planets and stars and all that, you had no knowledge at all about that. You would just assume, rightly so, right? You can admit that, at least, that you would think it's stationary and planar because that's the way it seems.
Yeah, I think it, and I think I'd be, so it's basically if I was ignorant of any other explanation, yeah, I might just go, oh yeah, the Earth's not moving, and like I might look out over the ocean and go, yeah, every night the sun goes into the water. I might do that.
Or you might actually, figure out if it is perspective that could work too, because other things you could look at like street lights and see that works where they seem to be getting smaller or, going down or, some of these things about perspective might be naturally something you could figure out on your own without having to, get out in space and take a picture of the planet you're on, So it's just,
but I never see the
street
lights. I never see the street lights go under the horizon. I never see them disappear.
Well, you could just go over to where if you see the sun go in the water, like you said, you could just go over there and you'll see that the sun's not in the water. And you're going to see it going down somewhere else. You're like, oh, wow. Then I go over there. It's not going down.
Yeah, and then I'd get real curious about what's going on. Like, how is that thing moving through the sky?
What is wrong with being skeptical of the images the government is showing you? Saying, I'm not going to believe this stuff. I'm not going to trust the government. I'm not going to believe these images. I'm going to go with what I know for a fact. What's wrong with that?
Well, he obviously knows 9/11 was an inside job, so he's not fully like everything the government says is true kind of guy, which is interesting.
He kind of is.
Yeah. What's wrong with it is that what goes along with that is there's an implicit assumption that's being asserted, which is that, so by saying I'm distrusting all of these images is the same as saying they're lying to me with every one of these images.
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
Okay, well, but wait, I think maybe just wait. Can we curtail that? I think it's better because a lot of us do feel like we wanted, a lot of us actually, most of us wanted to believe what we were shown. Like none of us wanted to be a flat earther. That's something you may not assume still, or may not know yet. You may assume that people want to believe in something that's like conspiratorial. But most of us here will tell you none of us wanted to be a flat earther. That was like the last thing. So we went through like with a fine-tooth comb on the moon landings and like looked at every single possible thing that I know you haven't done quite yet, and it's not a matter of, oh, it's all fake or space is fake in general or everything they're doing is fake, like a total absolute. It's like, this is like a study. This is a practice that, something that people have become very good at spotting, one thing or another being less likely to be true. But what I was getting at was if you can't name one thing that's self-evident about the motion or the curvature or being on a planet at all, you can't name one thing that's self-evident, then don't you think that might be a reason to look into how it could be that there's nothing about it that you would figure out on your own? You had to be taught everything about, the idea of being on a planet. Is that right there suspect in your discernment category?
I don't think that that's the right way that we should operate. Actually, I don't think that we should operate with distrust of everything everybody tells us and just have to confirm everything for ourselves. Otherwise, we'd be like,
I just said no absolutes. I said everything about it. There's nothing self-evident about it. Doesn't that like ring your bell right there? Like, wait a minute, nothing self-evident.
If you leave some meat or some trash out and you see maggots in it, it's self-evident that the maggots just like spawned from the meat. And so I just think that there's maggots in meat, and meat just gives rise to maggots. And I can just build a whole like worldview that life just spontaneously emerges from dead things. And, I could just, but if I go, oh, but somebody told me that there's an explanation for that. And then, but I doubt everything that everybody tells me until I can confirm it for myself. I go based on what's self-evident. Like if somebody tells me that I have blood cells that work in a certain way, I've never seen a blood cell myself. And so I'd have to go get a microscope and I'd have to do some lab work. But otherwise I don't believe in blood cells. It's like,
well, yeah, but that's a little bit of a straw man because it's not really a fair comparison. Like we're talking about our like everyday reality of every moment of our life. We're spinning, we're upside down, we're going around the sun. And it's an extraordinary claim, right? That does require extraordinary evidence. And that extraordinary evidence needs to be like beyond believable. Like if we like Gio and I talked about before, like if we were actually going out in space and had all these cameras and everything, we would have so much. This is what we assume, I guess, but it would seem, I think, to anybody reasonable that we would have so much footage from every single angle. From like we would have more than we could possibly want to be sure of this. Not just like a few of these things that are very, very questionable, if not completely fake in a lot of our minds. Like that's that they haven't met that extraordinary. They never did.
World are you in?
Never.
You're in a world where there's only a few photos from Earth, and they all look really suspect from space. Like there's hundreds and hundreds of hours of video, and from a bunch of different angles, and photographs from everywhere, and they all look awesome. Like, and everybody's like,
really?
Like, what are you talking about?
Well, from what I know, NASA only claims to have a few, quote unquote, or maybe one or two, like real, quote unquote, photographs, like that aren't CGI, right? That aren't manipulated or layered or whatever it is, right? Like the evidence stacks up so far beyond what you know right now. You haven't
photographs of what?
Of the Earth.
NASA
can you show me? Can you bring up one video of the spinning ball Earth right now for us and place it in the chat and say that totally looks believable to you? Just find one. Have you even tried?
Yeah, I'll post you one right now.
Great, that would be great.
And what I'll get, the infuriating thing is I'll get from a flat earther, they'll go like, that's so fake, but it doesn't look fake. It looks exactly what I imagine it would look like if I went out there and took that video. I'll show you one right now.
I posted one earlier. I'll post it again.
Does it look like an oblate spheroid to begin with?
It looks like a sphere.
It looks like a perfectly round ball, right? They don't even go by that.
I mean, how much thicker is it in the beginning? What's the percentage of the difference?
I mean, I'm just saying. I think you're in the process. I think we've all been there. And again, I'm not trying to be patronizing, but I'm saying that
this is like
the more it builds up, there's going to be a straw that breaks the camel's back for you. Where you're like,
dude, I've been fascinated with cults for a long time, and just doing the thing that cult people do when you do that.
Like what?
I'm fascinated with cults. I've studied them for a long time, a lot of different ones. This is exactly what cult people do. They say that a lot. All right, you're
okay,
at this
yeah,
place,
I do.
You're examining. Right. It's going to happen for you. It happened to us. The Mormons will tell you eventually you're going to feel the burning in your bosom when the Lord speaks to you, and then you'll know that it's true.
And we've laughed about that before because it feels like you're a Jehovah's Witness going up to somebody talking about flat Earth sometimes. Yeah. But if it's actually true, right? If actually it isn't a spinning ball, then how would you get over that? Like, how would you approach someone if you figured it out? That wouldn't seem like that.
All right, I've just posted a tweet from X that shows the delivery of a Lagrange point geostationary new satellite, weather satellite that they delivered. It's just like a couple of months ago. When they released the satellite, you can see a full image of the Earth right in the back, and it looks like a view from a million miles away on a wide-angle camera. And Flat Earth Dave will post this and go, so fake. And I'm like, that's all right. Like, what do you expect it to look like? It looks just like that's how it would look. And if you want to go look at it, a
lot of times people point out that there's no stars in the background. A lot of this is, you can say it's because of the exposure and all that. We've heard the reasons that they say that we don't see stars. But that's another reason they may not go back to the moon, because people would demand so many different, like 360 shots of the stars, and then we can see that the stars aren't in the right place, and it would take a lot of configuring to meet everybody's demands if they actually put a man on the moon again. If they just go up there and do the same sort of like, okay, well, it could or couldn't be, this is their chance to actually prove you can like do a 360, show the Earth, show everything anybody would possibly want to know about the moon to make sure that it's real. And it would be overwhelmingly undeniable if that were the case. If there was a rover on Mars. I mean, that if that was actually happening, I think people would actually be glued to their TV. Like, oh my God, that's amazing, because it would be so overwhelmingly believable that no one would doubt it if that was actually happening, because of what it would take to do that. And that's kind of maybe you don't have that discernment, or maybe you're actually smarter than the rest of us, and these are all real, and we're all just completely insane. But there's a lot of criticism here that I think that you might find agreement with if you keep going with your skepticism about it, rather than wanting to believe.
Action cam footage, 2017 spacewalk. There's just like a bunch, man. It's like in the no stars. I mean, I hear that all the time. No stars thing. It's like, well, they're in the daytime. I mean, everything's lit up. What do you want? Do you see stars during the day? I don't. But I mean, this is what I run into. This is the problem when it's just rough. You know, you show them, and then it's always like, okay, we don't understand photography. We have these big problems, and it's just like what they're doing to the Antarctica trip right now is the same thing I feel like flat earthers are always doing to space. Like, well, look at these shadows, look at the angles, look at this, look at that. Oh, was that a wire? And it's like that's what they're doing to Whitson and Jaron right now with it's like they went to Antarctica, bro. It's like, but everybody's finding a million reasons to say that it's fake and a studio and everything.
Well, that is true. That there is some agreement now, as far as like maybe people going overboard with saying it's all fake and it must have been a studio you were teleported to, and some of these outrageous claims. But I don't think that's a fair analogy to what people have done with their analysis of the ISS, and a lot of the things that we've seen with people like fading in and out and their head disappearing completely, like dropped into the to the shot. I mean, there's a lot. If you want to go through it, we could spend hours doing that. Most Glovers get to the point where they're like avoiding is it fake space? Is it fake pictures, or are they faking the ISS? Because if they want to believe it, they can, but it's kind of a losing argument on your end for that part. It really is, because there's a lot of it that even they could be doing on purpose to make people doubt it, and gaslight people. Even it would be the only answer I could come up with on some of it. Like maybe they're just gaslighting, right? Well, some people believe in the secret space program, right? And they're saying, oh, they do all that to make you think it's fake, but actually they're doing something way cooler. And they have moons, they have bases on Mars and the moon already, and and they go that direction with it because they realize that the footage is fake, but they still want to believe in space, so they go with like the ultra deep secret, reverse psychology of it. But as far as like the images go, I mean, I guess that's up to you. If you really do think that looked real and it doesn't look like it just could be studio lighting on a piece of, the satellite there, and then that when they go up, they do a parabolic arch, and then it always cuts to CGI, admittedly on both sides, and they have an excuse for why it needs to be CGI because they couldn't get the camera footage or whatever. But you never see the rocket go into space and go through whatever it is that they need to go through to get to that point where they're floating. We don't have good footage of that. You do have any? Do you have any you want to show us? Really good footage of that.
Going through what they need to go through?
Yeah, like when they go into space and they start floating, like the rocket takes off and goes around the Earth supposedly, and then it breaks through whatever barrier or non-barrier it is where they start floating. We just cut to a CGI as soon as it disappears, right? That's like typical for all of those launches.
Well, I mean, what do you think the Blue Origin space rides that people are going on? Do you think those are fake?
I think that from what I can see, that there may not be people, at least on the one that Shatner went on. I don't think he went up. You can see that it was cut. Where in fact, when the thing comes to a land, it hits hard. There's no way Shatner was in there. And then when they come out, it was the worst action job he ever did. And that's saying something because he wasn't a very good actor. But it was terrible. Did you see it where he's there with Jeff Bezos and just like over dramatically lost for words, but obviously not like coming off of that ride. Like it was beautiful. Did you see it? It's comical.
I think
Whether
I did,
you think they went up
I
or
don't
not,
remember going like, oh, I think he's lying. I think he's just like a weird Jew.
It was kind of cringe, man. I'm telling you.
But what about the Dude Perfect one? Those guys that do those long range,
well,
shots
wait a minute.
do you think that was? You think they're not going? You think
I haven't looked at those.
Yeah, we looked at
those.
it.
But wait, Wait a minute. You went through the process of figuring out 9/11 was an inside job, right? At first, we all believed it, right? We all thought it was like terrorists are here, and then we have to look out for all the Muslims and all this kind of, right? And then you realized it was not at all what they were telling us at some point.
Well, I still think planes hit the towers and the towers fell down. That's the thing.
Well, maybe you haven't looked into that part of it very closely, or maybe you're right. Maybe they did, but really, did you look at all of September clues? Did you look at September clues?
Yep, and I've seen all those. Yeah, those are all like bad. I saw,
And
these
you don't have
these
a
are
problem
old.
with the plane just like disappearing without the wings breaking off or anything, and it just melts into the building like butter and comes out the other side with the nose and everything.
It doesn't come out the other side. That's a lie. That's just like a thing that.
Okay,
some
so
guys
that was
like,
edited. It looks like that.
No, it's just like the way that the gas pressure came out the other side. There is a little spot that looks like, you could say that it looks like the nose of a plane, but it's not the nose of a plane. That's just like the part of the explosion. Like the idea that they just edited it bad, and then they forgot to like how physics works, and they made it to where the nose
What
came out the
convinced
other
you it
side
was
is
an inside job?
retarded.
What convinced you it wasn't what they were telling us?
Project for a New American Century, and like PNAC and the clean break memo, and the fact that like K Bono, it set us up for a war in the Middle East for 20 years. They wanted it really bad. It gave them justification to do everything that they did. The planes were scrambled and stood down to be able to stop the jets. The hijackers were let in. Everybody knew them. Osama bin Laden basically worked with CIA. Like, it was a setup, but it doesn't mean
And then you also the pancake theory doesn't check out, right?
No,
Like, you think they blew up the
it's
buildings,
fine.
but planes actually went into the buildings, right? But they actually blew them up, or no?
No. The buildings fell down because of the damage and then the fire. Yeah.
And including all the other 5 buildings, like all of them went down that day.
No, one other one, building 7.
Well, that's usually where we get to, but actually, when you look into it, there was 6, I think, at least maybe 7. Was it Geo? How many actually went down that day?
But either way, the system was felted, and that thing got smashed by a bunch of debris on the way down, and it burned uncontrollably for hours. And it was built over an electrical substation, which blew up because of the fires. And then there was a whole penthouse built on top of that building decades after the original construction that was extremely heavy, and it was over the main pillars. And when the main pillars buckled, the whole rest of the inside collapsed. The reason why Building 7 came down is not a mystery. And the idea that, but Larry Silverstein said pull it. He wasn't speaking in demolition jargon, and he accidentally slipped up and mentioned that they decided to blow rigged bombs. He was just saying that he pulled out the firefighters so that there would be no more loss of life.
But have you looked at it, though? I mean, all 4 corners coming down.
I've looked at it.
From fire? You think that's possible?
Well, it didn't. The whole inside had imploded before the outside fell down. The outside fell down like a house of cards because the inside had already fallen down because of the fire. But what you don't have is what you have in every single demolition, and I've watched 1,000 of them. We did a whole feature of it on my stream. What you don't have is a series of explosions, which you would have to bring down a building that size. Boom, 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 boom.
That's funny because that's what the firefighters said they heard, right?
No, the firefighters said that they heard booms, explosions in the basement of the towers, not in Building 7. Building 7 doesn't have a big demolition type explosion where there's glass flying everywhere and everything like that. It falls inside to itself fairly quietly and slowly. It doesn't fall at free fall speed. The whole inside crumbles in, and then the outside follows.
It's in the chat. That's the most controlled looking demolition I've ever seen. It's in the chat right now. Look at it.
Okay,
that's BigTech. Knows what kind of technology they have.
I'm looking.
Use your eyes and look. That's a fucking controlled demolition.
All right. Well, that's not an argument.
What's not an argument?
Looks like one, therefore it is one. That's not an argument. Looks like one, therefore it is.
And the building hopped to the. Okay. That's what, dude. What are you talking about? Use your eyes. For fuck's sake.
Not an argument.
Anyway,
use your eyes is not an argument.
And you think an argument is?
You have to admit, it's crazy that not only the two buildings went down, and as far as you know, the third one went down, from fire as well, like completely collapsed down into their own footprint. Regardless if you think it's possible or not, it's a pretty extraordinary claim, right? And if you use Occam's razor, like, is it most likely that that those buildings were blown up? If it was an inside job, then why not have the buildings actually blown up? So what's the inside job?
Was to have the buildings hit by planes.
And they then would think that the buildings would go down from hitting them with planes, or do they think the planes would just
let me ask you this question: if the buildings didn't fall down, would we have still had the war on terror? Yes.
Exactly.
They
So
didn't
the
even
buildings
need the
needed
buildings to fall
down.
down. They did fall down, but making
okay.
the buildings fall down isn't the point. The point is to have the buildings hit by fucking airliners. The attack was done before the buildings fell down. The attack is what we retaliated against. The fact that they fell is also terrible. It wasn't required. It's like if the building stood, then we would have been like, well, we'll let it slide this time. It's like, okay, yeah, and they fell down and it's fucking crazy. It's terrible, but they got hit by planes that were flown by hijackers who came from Saudi Arabia. It's like that's the narrative is that they told us is the inside job to make us have this enemy over there who wants to hurt us. The inside job wasn't to make buildings fall down.
That's a story. I don't know. I mean, just if you want to believe in that story, I mean, at the same time, it could be that they blew up the buildings, right? Are you saying it's impossible for them to have blown up those buildings to cause the same reaction they got? It was an inside job. It's possible.
No, you're moving the goalpost. I'm not saying that it's impossible.
I'm asking if it's possible.
No, well, that's a different question than did
planes
hit the building.
Right. I'm just asking, do you think it's possible that they were blown up?
I mean, what? Do you want me to say that it's impossible that there were any bombs? Is that what you're asking me?
Well, I mean, don't you think that's within isn't that like one of your considerations that it could be that they blew them up instead of like so fully confident that they didn't and it was planes?
It could be that it was space lasers because it had been microwave direct energy weapons melted.
That's straw manning it though.
Well, is it impossible?
Well, no, but I'm asking you, like, haven't you at least considered that? Well, if they're gonna want this reaction and they're gonna build that tower afterwards, and they wanted to get rid of some of the things that people were talking about that were secret documents in the Building 7 and all these other things, like, well, it may be that they really wanted to get rid of those buildings so then they could have the whole full thing cleared out into its own footprint, take all the stuff away the next day with the controlled demolition crew. It was called controlled demolition. And you look at all the people in charge, the people in charge of security and the reports of the people coming in and being in the building that were not supposed to be there. They were supposedly like practicing for some kind of theatrical thing. I mean, there's so many other things that make it, like, for us, seem that it seems undeniable that it was a controlled demolition. But for you, you have to
let me ask you this. Here, for the way I see it, right? Is it harder to trick the world into thinking that planes hit the towers, or just have two planes hit the towers? What's harder? Trick the whole world, or just fly two planes into towers?
Actually, it'd be pretty difficult. First of all, you have to have a pilot, right? You have to have somebody willing to kill themselves. Then you have to actually aim the plane at the right exact spot, right? And I don't know if you think it was terrorists. They had no ground control.
Blow up a Tesla truck for no reason in front of a Trump.
They would have had to eye it. They would have had to just like steer, looking out the window of where they are, and then aim straight at the building. Like, if the plan was for that terrorists to hit the buildings, then are you saying the terrorists were hired by our government to do that? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you call our government. Like, if they were basically set up by Mossad, which might as well be our government at this point, but yeah, the Israeli CIA.
But think about all the different things. I mean, if you're going to do that, I mean, it was such a clean act, like the way it fell down into its own footprint. You didn't have to too much other damage. There's not a whole lot of people on the street. No big things fell on it. If you're going to try to aim a airplane at a building and you don't hit it perfectly, and I would argue that it would never just melt into the building, being an aluminum plane in a steel frame building. Their wings would have broke off. There would have been all kinds of different things that would have happened. People could have gotten crushed from just the wing falling off right there on the street. I mean, there could have been all kinds of things. If you missed the building by just a smidge, then the plane goes into another building completely and causes a bunch of deaths that you didn't plan on for your terrorist false flag thing. I mean, it'd be much easier. In fact, what might have been is a heat-guided missile. They have the pictures of them that are dressed up like American Airlines, right? They put the stripes on them. And you have one person stand in the crowd of 20. They say they saw a plane, even though it was just a heat-guided missile, a Tomahawk or whatever, that goes right into the building. And that causes the explosion. And out of the corner of your eye, you may see something and been convinced it was a plane because there's someone shouting that they actually saw the plane, and you're convinced because they were convinced.
Dude, I'm going to give you a video of 50 eyewitnesses, and not testimonies, 50 different vantage points, people filming the second plane going in. And every one of them, You can hear the plane, it comes and hits, and then they'll go, "Oh my God, another plane!" Every one of them. So those are all fake. They faked the whole thing, and the people in the street who said they're looking up and there's a plane-size hole in the side of the building. And you're going,
whether
nope,
they're
it was a missile.
I guess we're trying to get more like the discernment. I just think it's interesting to hear these different takes on it, especially someone that like buys one part of a story but not the other part of it, and why most people don't end up there with this. Like, you're rare. Most people think that that the buildings were blown up, or they just totally believe the story they were told.
Yeah, and this is the problem. This is what I'm saying. It's like when I ask people what's the 9/11 conspiracy, they go, "Oh, there was bombs in the building." That's not the conspiracy. The conspiracy is that Israel set up 9/11. The conspiracy is not that it was blown up by bombs or that there was no planes. It actually just becomes a big distraction. The conspiracy is about who did it and why, and who was it blamed on falsely. That's the conspiracy. The inside job was the insiders in our government, not people inside the building. The conspiracy is not about elevator repairmen. The conspiracy is about the Mossad connection to the Saudis and the neocons.
Well, yeah, that's why I was. But that's why I was asking, like, why is it so important if it was the buildings were blown up or not? If that's not the conspiracy,
and that's my
then why is
answer.
it
My
important
answer is that it distracts from the actual conspiracy. And these videos, like the loose change things and the new Pearl Harbor video, that's still on YouTube, by the way, because they want people believing, looking into the bullshit. Was there even planes? Was there even hijackers? Was it a missile? How did the buildings even go down? Did they fake these cell phone calls? Like, all these questions become this big old rabbit hole of like, what in the hell? But nobody will allow a video on YouTube that's about, look at these guys in our government who wanted us to go to war, and they set up this event. They knew it was going to happen. They scrambled the jets to prevent them from shooting it down. It was all a setup for 9/11
Well,
to
there's a
happen.
lot
So
of those videos. A lot of people are talking about that. But yeah, but my point is that, okay, but you know, I agree with you. Ironically, I agree with you that there was a controlled opposition. I think the whole thing, the controlled opposition on both sides of it, was planned from the start. All the mistakes were made on purpose to cause a conspiracy, because we're in an information war now, and it's all about manipulation of information and causing people to believe in conspiracies and making it obvious on purpose, and then making mistakes on purpose creates the controlled opposition of these people pointing out things that make no sense, like the tire that's still inflated, or the engine that was the wrong engine for the kind of plane it was, or the passport that was found that wasn't exploded. I mean, did you think that they found a passport by the guy? Do you think that was real evidence that they found, or do you think that was made up?
I don't know. That could just be a bullshit part of the narrative where they are pinning it on this guy.
Right.
Or it could have been in his fanny pack, and when that thing exploded, the fanny pack blew out, the fanny pack got singed, but they found the passport inside. I don't know. I don't know what happens to a passport that's inside of a thing in a guy's pocket when an explosion happens. I don't know.
But we're in agreement. All those things could have been planted to create the conspiracy that created the information war and part of the truth movement that we're in right now. Maybe even if it's like the inside job creating it for a conspiracy, if you think that flat Earth is a psyop, which it would have to be if you think it. I mean, otherwise it's just a bunch of random people that decided that they think this. You think that flat Earth is probably a psyop, right? Like
I think Eric Dubay is very sus, and I think the whole Robotham thing is weird, and it died out after him, but then it started again right around the Cold War era when Russians really wanted us to shut down our space agency, shut down our nuclear program, and they were putting all sorts of FUD into the air about whether or not space is even real. Did we even do the moon mission? It was like there's all sorts of disinfo. There's reasons to cause doubt and confusion.
I agree with that. I agree with the disinfo. In fact, there's a lot of disinfo, probably controlled opposition within flat Earth, which makes it a lot more believable to see as a psyop if you realize that, if you don't already think you're not at a ball or whatever. And 9/11 then being the controlled opposition, a psyop that it was, even if it was an inside job, it was like you say, maybe there wasn't all of these other things, that no planes and all these other things are just kind of distractions, but it worked to give the people the idea that the lie can be that big. Therefore, then if they planned on flat Earth being a psyop layer, they would be more primed to think that that's possible because they've been lied to on such a level. That would be part of the workings of it, thinking of it long term, right?
Yeah, I think it does the opposite. I don't think that it makes people more conspiratorial and then they end up finding out about the real conspiracies. I think what it does is it muddies the water so they can hide in plain sight. Now that there's 10 wacky conspiracy theories, the big one that matters gets lumped in with all of them, and then everybody's kind of scattergunning all over the place. And then then regular people who might come across the one that matters, they get spooked off by all the weirdos who are saying even more bizarre stuff that's obviously not true, and they go, I don't know if I can trust any of this because it's coming from shady sources.
Right, you're
So I
right
think it
about
serves
that.
to water
And,
it
and they
down.
do that with flat Earth too. Like I even heard you earlier, kind of like talking about some of these things that flat Earth is kind of a distraction, and some of the real conspiracies are ignored because people are, thinking that the Earth is flat, and you added in some of these other things that were straw men that a lot of flat earthers don't think, but a lot of that gets thrown into it. The Anunnaki, maybe some of the stuff about you know gates and portals, and they kind of throw in the lizard people and stuff. And you think all flat earthers probably believe that too because they lack discernment, and that's kind of thrown at flat earthers a lot. Like, oh, you probably think there's an ice wall that surrounds us, even though that's not necessarily anyone that thinks that. I mean, the whole thing about flat Earth is not trying to jump on a bandwagon and just believe something that you can't falsify.
You're telling me most flat earthers don't think there's an ice wall?
I think they may speculate that there would be one or a containment of some sort, but I wouldn't say that falls into the belief part of it or the speculation part of it, which we like to try to keep separated. Whereas, like, okay, well, we know it's stationary level, but are we just believing in an AE map coordinate system transform, or are we just assuming about this ice wall? Did they show that as part of the narrative? A lot of us are very skeptical about that idea. We don't know. I mean, if I had to guess, I would say it's an infinite plane and probably lots of outer ponds. If I had to guess, but that's just speculation. It's not a belief.
Yeah, but I mean, even that is just like we know that it's stationary and level. I mean, we can rehash the whole thing. I'm happy to. I like doing it, but it's not stationary. We have ways of knowing that it's not stationary, and level doesn't mean flat. We'd still have levels that would work on a sphere. So
well, we know all that. We know all the reasoning behind that. We all were raised with that. We all came from that, right? We all knew that was the reasoning that we're supposed to think that. But there's nothing self-evident about those planes whatsoever.
How is it possible that you know that the Earth's in motion if the whole idea of Einstein's theory of relativity is all motion is relative? So anytime that you went to school and the government told you that the Earth goes around the sun, that's technically just one reference frame in the Einsteinian model, which there are infinite reference frames. So,
well, you don't need relativity to sense and experience the Earth's rotation and curve.
So where do I experience the Earth's rotation at?
You can do that when you shoot a sniper bullet about 1,000 yards.
You really believe that? All the variables, and you think that at 1,000 yards you can detect missing someone by a couple inches because of Earth's rotation?